blades inside their own schools. Throughout today's show, I'll ask some of the UK's foremost experts, how do we stamp out the cancer of knife crime? And an astonishing new political poll called Damage Politics has shown record low levels of trust in British politicians. Incredibly, a record 58% said they had almost never trusted any politicians of any political party to tell the truth when they were in a tight corner. And I'll speak to the report's author, Sir John Curtis, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. So was today the day when the Tories officially raised the white flag? They seem to have all been given up. And look at this picture. This is Dame Andrea Jenkyns campaigning today. She's got a photograph on her campaign leaflet. Who is it? Is it Rishi? Is it Boris? No, it's Nigel Farage on a Conservative candidate's literature, and no mention of the C word. Is this the beginning of a political alignment, a non-aggression pact, the sort of deal those on the right would like to see happening? Sensible or cynical? Let me know what you think. Get in touch all the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, epic smorgasbord, it's your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak insists he hasn't given up hope of winning the general election, but has warned voters not to give Labour a blank cheque. The Prime Minister's campaigning at a school in North East Lincolnshire today as new figures show the economy stagnated in April with zero growth. It is a setback to his claim that the UK's turned a corner. Well, the Tories pointed to figures that demonstrate the economy has, in fact, grown in the previous 3 months to April. But the Lib Dems say Rishi Sunak's utterly failed to deliver on his promises. Sir Keir Starmer says Labour's plan will renew the country.
The one thing that everybody expected and needed from Rishi Sunak was stability after the disaster of Liz Truss. What he's now done is become the latest version of Liz Truss with unfunded commitments. And I think the public know, voters know, that there's a cost to that and they want an alternative. And that's why I'm really pleased that tomorrow in our manifesto we will take a different approach. We will set out the case for growth, for rebuilding, for putting our nation first to go forward.
The Liberal Democrats have outlined plans to end what they've described as a sewage scandal in England and Wales. They've promised to transform water firms into public benefit companies. They've promised to ban bonuses for water bosses until the leaks stop, and also to replace the regulator Ofwat with a tougher governing body. The party says the Clean Water Authority would be given new powers to reform the sector. Nigel Farage has been offered additional private security by the Home Office after objects were thrown towards him during campaigning. A man's been charged after a coffee cup and other items from a building site narrowly missed the Reform UK leader on an open-top bus in Barnsley yesterday. 28-year-old Josh Greeley's been charged with using threatening, abusive, insulting words and behaviour with intent to cause fear or provoke unlawful violence. He's been released on bail and will appear in court later this month. A record number of people have lost faith in British politics, according to the electoral expert Sir John Curtis. Sir John's analysis has found trust and confidence in politics and the overall election system has never been lower. 45% of respondents almost never believe governments of any party are fully focused on the challenges facing the country, and a record 58% said they almost never trust politicians of any party to tell the truth. A 19-point increase from 2020. The French president is vowing to fight on, even if his party suffers losses in a snap election. Emmanuel Macron says dissolving parliament was the only possible response to the far-right's strong showing in last weekend's European elections. He insists the snap election will bring clarity, although polls put the right-wing leader Marine Le Pen in first place, with Macron trailing in third. The French president has urged his political rivals to join him by forging a democratic alliance against Le Pen's national rally. The US Secretary of State says some of the latest changes put forward by Hamas to ceasefire proposals in Gaza are unworkable, meaning the war will go on. Antony Blinken's been studying the latest demands alongside mediators in Qatar. It's understood Hamas will only accept Joe Biden's deal if it gets written guarantees from the US over a permanent ceasefire and over the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's military says around 160 rockets have been fired into the north of the country from Lebanon. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility. A second man's denied chopping down the sycamore gap tree last year. 31-year-old Adam Crothers is accused of causing £622,000 worth of damage to the tree. A second man, 38-year-old Daniel Graham, was, according to his barrister, unavoidably detained and did not appear in court today, but has previously entered a not guilty plea. The tree was a popular attraction for visitors and stood by Hadrian's Wall in a dramatic dip in Northumberland for more than 2 centuries, until it was felled in September, sparking a national outcry. Co-op banks apologised after customers complained of a glitch that saw payments taken twice from some small business account holders. People took to social media to vent their frustration, with one claiming they were £5,000 out of pocket with no resolution in sight. Another said their account had been in overdraft all day, but they hadn't had a notification from the bank. A spokesperson for Co-op has apologised and says a correction is currently being processed. And flights have been grounded in Mallorca as a result of heavy rain and flooding at Spain's third busiest airport. You can see this video on social media shows water spilling into the parking area as some cars outside the terminal have been partially submerged. Spain's weather agency has recorded between 5 and 9 centimetres of rain per hour. The Mediterranean island, of course, famous for its beaches and good weather. It's particularly popular for British tourists. More on all of our stories by signing up to GB News Alerts. The code's on your screen and the details are on our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Aaron. Now, the big conversation today is this. Have the Conservatives already thrown in the towel? Well, in a rather extraordinary circumstances, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has warned the electorate of handing Starmer's Labour Party a supermajority at the general election, saying that it would put the UK in a dangerous place. And there he is, in a front row seat at Rishi Sunak's manifesto launch just yesterday. Is this the most extraordinary act of political surrender in British history? Well, back on the campaign trail today, however, the Prime Minister insisted that he has absolutely not given up on winning the election. And let's speak now with GB News' political editor, Chris Hope, who has been with the Prime Minister today. Chris, welcome to the show. An astonishing set of circumstances. Talking about a supermajority, it seems they've all but given up. Now they're just trying to work out that the end game won't be quite as bad as they want. It seems like they've thrown the towel in, Chris.
Hi Martin, yeah, welcome to the one on the train going back to London, having been with the Prime Minister in Grimsby at a school. Yeah, that's right. I actually asked him, for GB News viewers, off camera, have you given up? To the Prime Minister, given those remarks from Grant Shapps overnight, and he said what you saw yesterday is we put up the manifesto forward, which has got a very clear set of tax cuts for the country, tax cuts at every stage of life. I think there was a degree of relief from the Prime Minister that they got this manifesto out the door. It's out there. It proposes £18 billion worth of spending cuts on getting more money back in tax and tax avoidance, tax evasion, and spending cuts to welfare, balanced by £17 billion worth of tax cuts. That's the offer. I think we've almost reached halfway point in this campaign. It's half time. The Tory party is 3-0 down. They've got to try and win the game now, do almost like a miracle of Istanbul that Liverpool did in the European Cup back in the day. They've got to somehow pull it out the bag, and that's the challenge he's got. He's laid out his offer to the country now. The next 3 weeks are all about getting around the country and convincing people to give him a second chance. On the issue of not giving Labour a supermajority, he said that's not what I would would say, but he did use the term blank cheque. He urged voters not to give Labour a blank cheque. By that they means with a majority so big, the party can do virtually anything and face no opposition in the House of Commons. So he's a punchy Prime Minister today. He's always pumped, he told us. He's genuinely energised. He's fuelled apparently on lots of sugar. He says Haribos and Twixes, and he likes playing board games to relax, Martin.
And they're seeming to talk about reform quite a lot today, Chris. An astonishing revelation you and I talked about before we came on air. Andrea Jenkins campaigning as a Conservative candidate. She hasn't got a picture of Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson or indeed any Tories anywhere on there. In fact, there's no mention at all of the C word. In fact, behind her, a picture of Nigel Farage. Chris, a lot of people are talking about this. Is this the flickerings of some kind of non-aggression pact, a coming together of the Conservatives and reform?
Well, not yet, Martin. Andrea Jenkins was an MP in the last Parliament, and she, of course, was the only one, I think, who publicly submitted a letter of no confidence in her leader, Rishi Sunak. She never withdrew that letter. Someone must assume she has no confidence in him now as leading the party into this election on July the 4th. She has said since that was posted, that document, that lots of excitement over my leaflet today. She says all Conservatives must be prepared to come together to prevent a socialist supermajority and the end of Britain as we know it, and then a hashtag country first. She's clearly saying there, appealing to reform voters to come to me. I'm a Tory, but I'm also kind of aligned with Farage. That's why the picture's there, but I'm a Conservative first and foremost. She's appealing for reform voters not to give Keir Starmer that supermajority. And we are hoping, Martin, I think, to get Andrea on the show to explain to you what on earth she meant.
Yeah, that deal has been done. She's out campaigning today, but we will get her on the show tomorrow, Chris. But there seems to be few crumbs of comfort for the Conservatives. A poll out today, 46% of all voters think the Tories deserve to lose every single seat they've got. And astonishingly, that includes 25% of all Conservative voters in 2019. Don't want them to have a single seat left, Chris.
Yeah, there's a feeling of punishment beatings for the Tory party, and they get nothing right. The glass is always half empty, it seems, even if they go to Silverstone, rather than lapping the opposition yesterday when they unveiled their manifesto. They're stuck in a pit lane in second gear or reverse gear, and so it goes on. The party is dogged by problems. They're kind of down on the party altogether across the country, and that's part of the problem, the challenge facing Rishi Sunak and his Haribos, how to get some sugar into the electoral diet. I was struck by the YouGov poll last night that Sky News did, Martin. They said there that Labour's on 38 points, the Tories 18 points, and Reform 17 points, 1 point behind. But if you combine Reform and the Tory party, an error. And that's why it's so important for the Tory party to get to those don't knows and get to the Reform UK support base and say, don't give Keir Starmer this super majority that he looks set to scoop up on July the 4th.
Chris Hope, get yourself safely back to London. And when you get to the end of the line, a metaphor perhaps for the Conservatives, we hope to see you back in the studio here at 5 o'clock. Chris Hope, thank you very much for that update live from the campaign trail. I can now get the view of the chief political commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul, who joins me in the studio. John, it seems that the Tories have simply thrown in the towel.
Well, it's not quite throwing in the towel, is it? It's a sort of, it's more to mix your sporting metaphors. It's more a sort of Hail Mary pass, like in American football, where it's a sort of desperate last throw when you're right up against it. You've been pushed all the way back, and so you're sort of pulling out the stops and your last sort of break the glass moment. But it's extraordinary to be doing this at this stage of the campaign. I mean, we are. At midnight tonight, I think, is halfway through the election campaign. It's the sort of thing that you would expect a losing campaign to do in the final days to just try and rescue something from the wreckage.
And the fact that they're talking about the size of the defeat and what will be left is an incredible situation, and it's almost like they're divorcing their wife and they're arguing over the goldfish.
Well, yeah, no, it is extraordinary. I mean, and I know obviously, technically, what Grant Shapps said and the Prime Minister says is that, of course, they think they can still win, but that they are talking about possible size of Labour majorities suggests that they're in damage limitation mode. They're just trying to save what they can.
What do you make of this skullduggery of Andrea Jenkins featuring Nigel Farage on her literature?
Well, it's a survival instinct, isn't it? It's trying to rescue anything from the wreckage. Because I mean, she's got a seat with a notional majority of 16%, vulnerable to an 8% swing to the Labour Party. At the moment, the opinion polls suggest that the swing is going to be much bigger than that. So she's just trying to do what she can to try and see off the reform challenge, and to try and hold on to her seat. But I think it's a goner.
And what do you make of these polls out today? 25% of all 2019 Conservatives want their party to lose every single seat. And then the Sir John Curtis report, Damage Politics, 58% of voters, a record number, said that they almost never trust politicians of any party to tell the truth.
Well, this is why trying to appeal to the voters not to give Labour a huge majority seems to me a pretty doomed strategy, to be honest, because people want to punish the Conservatives. They actually think, that if the Conservatives lose badly, that would be a good thing. I mean, you talk to Reform voters, they're very hard to persuade to come back to the Tory fold. I mean, half of them, say that they will, under no circumstances, vote Tory. So, trying to scare them with the prospect of a large Labour victory isn't going to work, because I mean they just want the Conservatives to be smashed.
Can I get one quick line out of you as well? In the same poll, 53% of voters said that the system should be changed, proportional representation, to allow smaller parties to get a fairer share. Do you think that will ever happen?
No, well, I mean, that's what people say in response to a superficial opinion poll. You put it to a referendum, and they voted in 2011, they voted 2/3 against. They wanted to keep the existing system.
Talking of referendums, John, in that poll, the most disaffected voters were those who voted for Brexit. Why do you think that is?
Well, because they wanted change. They voted for change, and they ended up getting more of the same and a chaotic government. They didn't see the benefits that they were hoping for from Brexit.
Or perhaps they voted for Brexit and they watched the entire system try and frustrate their vote for 4 long years.
But they eventually got what they wanted, and they didn't like it.
Or did they? Thank you very much for joining us. John Rentoul, an absolute pleasure to have you in the studio. Now, a quick reminder, here are the other candidates standing in the Leeds South West and Morley constituency. The Green Party, Chris Bell. Yorkshire Party, Howard Graham. Jews, Liberal Democrats, Michael Fox. Conservative, Andrea Jenkins. The Reform UK is James Kendall. SDP, Nigel Perry. And Labour is Mark Sewards. Meanwhile, there are question marks over whether we can expect tax rises in Labour's manifesto to be announced tomorrow. And here's what Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer had to say when he was asked about this earlier today.
All of our plans are fully costed, fully funded. There will be no increase in income tax, in national insurance or VAT, and we'll launch our manifesto tomorrow. There'll be no tax surprises, and none of our plans require tax rises over and above the rises that we've already set out. But what you will see tomorrow is a plan for the future of the country, a manifesto that sets out how we will rebuild and renew the country and sets out the first steps that we will take in government on day one to set us down that path of renewal and rebuilding. So it'll be a very different manifesto to the one that the Tories unveiled yesterday.
And the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, has also been out on the campaign trail today, and he was asked for his thoughts on the UK GDP figures, which came out earlier today.
As the time ticks away from Rishi Sunak and his premiership, as he has his last few days in office, I'm afraid the economy is petering too. The Conservatives promised to grow the economy, to make it more prosperous, and they failed utterly. And whether it's the cost of living, which has hit people so hard, with the energy bills, the rent, the mortgages, the food bills, and the Conservatives have done nothing to help with that, or whether it's the economy not growing properly. The Conservatives have so mismanaged our economy, from Liz Truss's appalling mini-budget to Rishi Sunak's failures. They should get out of the way, and Liberal Democrats have some really attractive, positive ideas to rebuild our economy and help people with the cost of living.
I'll have lots more on the election coverage throughout the show, of course, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now it's time for the Great British Giveaway now, and your chance to make this summer really special with over £16,000 worth of prizes to be won, and that's 15 grand tax-free cash and a whole host of treats. Now you've got to be in it to win it, and here's all the details that you need.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, we really need to talk about knife crime following on from the shocking murder of Sean Sisahai by 2 12-year-old boys, which comes as a survey today claims that 46% of British teenagers are scared of knife crime, including 31% inside their own schools. Much to discuss. I'll speak to a raft of experts. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing we've got is obviously D-Day, which was so moving that I think everybody was crying. You see these wonderful old people who gave their lives, and they were crying to remember it all. You see tears in the King's eyes. You saw Camilla, the Queen, crying. And I think, gosh, you know, actually Britain's maybe opening up, and we're not sort of stiff upper lip all the time anymore. I think that William was so dignified.
Oh, he's amazing, isn't he?
And he was the young king. And I thought he was brilliant. He must have been heartbroken that he couldn't have his wife with him. And one of the people who knocks us on the head now and then is Harry. He got the green light to appeal to the appeal. It's a third one, and he wants to make sure that the government gives him protection all the time, automatically. One of the reasons is that he's going away with Meghan for a tour, world tour, which made my heart sort of pump, because this is going to be another copy of what the royal family is like. And he wants to be covered. Well, it's not on our tax, frankly.
So we, the British public, would pay for this?
Yes, yes. It's a joke, isn't it? And he also said he wanted it all done by the end of the month, June, and the judge said he doesn't deserve that. He's not in that VIP category. So he was sort of put in his place, but I don't think he can believe that. And the other thing is the wonderful wedding yesterday. And one of the things I loved, there was a wedding dress, but also I loved the blue velvet shoes. William again was wonderful.
Yeah.
He was absolutely wonderful. He was ushering everyone around, which seems funny for an heir to the throne, and actually would jump in the bus that was taking them to the celebration.
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, we desperately need to talk about knife crime. On Monday, two 12-year-old boys were jailed for murdering Sean C. Sahai with a 16-inch machete, making them Britain's youngest killers since the James Bulger case. Today, two grim reports cast a further shadow over the land. First, the West Midlands has become the knife crime capital of the UK. Astonishingly, knife crime there is 8.3% higher even than in London. And next, a shocking BBC survey claimed that 46% of British teenagers are scared of knife crime, including 31% scared of knives inside their own schools. Now, many things have been blamed for this: gang culture, austerity, even grime music. But today, I want to ask some big questions. Where are the parents? Is it time to punish them? And in particular, what powers do the police need? And let's start on that topic now, because I'm joined by the former Metropolitan Police Officer, Chris Hobbs. Chris, I know you care passionately about this topic. We've spoken about it endlessly. Things seem to be getting worse and worse and worse. Tell me, what on earth do the police need to do? What powers would you like to see cops have?
I think basically part of the thing we want to see is a change in attitude in terms of stop and search. It's one tool, and there's a lot behind knife crime, and stop and search isn't a panacea, but it is a deterrent, and it does take, in London, something like 300 to 400 weapons off the streets every month. Now, apparently, we've heard from the Met that stop and search has been reduced, or police officers are stepping away from stop and search, because if a stop and search goes wrong, if the person being stop and search resists and it has to be done by force, then there's all hell to pay in terms of inquiries, investigations, the IOPC, and their jobs are on the line, and maybe even imprisonment. So that's an issue in London. It's certainly an issue in the West Midlands. It's also a massive issue across the country. We're seeing a frightening explosion in knife crime, and it's not just in the big cities. But of course, the Met before have previously launched campaigns against knife crime. Operation Blunt some years ago curbed it. Now, of course, we've got the added problem, the massive problem of social media. And the issues that causes, linked to drill music, for example, the gang culture that we see in London and in the West Midlands, and the fact that a lot of these gang leaders, these drill music artists who also engage in violence, are seen as role models, as heroes. Everyone in a particular school, for example, and you've just mentioned schools, will know all about their local gangs. They will know who the gang leaders are. And some of those kids will worship those gang leaders. They're almost, in a perverse way, the wrong sort of role models. Many of them are dead. A lot of them are in prison. But this issue around gang culture really is spawning this massive increase that we're seeing at the moment.
OK, Chris, I want to put a picture on the screen now, and it's a picture of one of the 12-year-old lads that killed Sean C. Sahai. Can we get it on the screen, please? This is the picture, look. He's got a 16-inch machete. This is the boy that was guilty of that murder. A machete you can see strapped to his body there. Look, it goes inside his jogging bottoms. It's right up almost to his throat. A machete as long as his torso. This is a 12-year-old, Chris, a 12-year-old boy with a knife that's a deadly weapon. It was used with such force, it almost went through the body of this poor deceased 19-year-old Sean. What can we do about these kind of knives? This isn't like a pen knife or a flick knife. This is a giant machete, Chris Hobbs.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's absolutely horrendous, isn't it? And no matter what laws we introduce, if you want to get hold of one of these horrendous implements, you can. It's not difficult to do online. Or you can basically go through someone who's a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit more savvy than you are, someone maybe higher up the gang hierarchy, and you can get them. What you need really is a deterrent to make sure that when people take these knives out onto the streets, then the odds are they are going to be stopped. Now, at the moment, there's some talk, isn't there, about a new instrument that will be able to stop or spot knives underneath people's clothing before there's any stop and search. Perhaps we do need to invest in new technology. But at the moment, there are issues around parenting. Some of these estates where the gangs rule, let's make no mistake about it, you have got poverty and deprivation, and that's what the gangs feed off, and that's where they get their recruits, and that's where they get the youngsters of 12, 11, 10 who hero worship the gang leaders. And they are not the sort of role models that we want to see, but the good role models, maybe that used to exist in youth clubs when we had them, for example, all that has gone in the cuts. Community policing has massively suffered in the cuts. And we're now hearing this ludicrous claim, aren't we? The extra police the government have found and are going to find. They've, in a way, they presented the police with a poison chalice in the first place. But now it's a massive problem, and it really needs everyone to start singing from the same hymn sheet. Not activists who are saying racist police are bad, stop and search is evil, scrap stop and search. God forbid if we scrap stop and search for a month or 6 months and had a virtual moratorium on it. Ask yourself, or these activists should ask themselves, where would we be then? It's a huge problem. It may only get worse, but we really need some initiatives. And as I say, there's some good people out there doing some great work. But the police...
certainly is. Chris Hobbs, we have to leave it there, and we're going to speak to some of those people later in the show. In particular, I'm going to be asking them, how do we stop kids carrying knives in the first place? And is it time to start punishing the parents? The parents of that 12-year-old boy apparently let him out to all hours. The police were always around. The neighbours had to put barbed wire up. Where were the parents in all of this? Chris Hobbs, former Met Police Officer, thank you very much for joining us on today's show and giving us your illustrious expert opinion. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, and we'll be hearing about the Green Party's pledge to fund the NHS by £50 billion a year by introducing a wealth tax on the mega-rich. But first, it's your headlines, and it's Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, good afternoon. It's 3:32. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Rishi Sunak insists he hasn't given up hope of winning the general election, but he has warned voters not to give Labour a blank cheque. The Prime Minister has been campaigning at a school in northeast Lincolnshire as new figures show the economy stagnated in April. Zero growth. It's a setback to his claim the UK and the economy has turned a corner. The Tories pointed to figures, though, that demonstrate the economy had grown in the previous 3 months to April. But Labour and the Liberal Democrats say the Tories have failed to deliver on their promises. Chronic numbers of potholes would be fixed under a new plan by the Labour Party. They say Tory cuts have led to poorly maintained roads, causing damage to cars and contributing to higher insurance premiums. The party's promising to direct special funding to councils to fix 1 million potholes a year, and says Labour will turn the tide of neglect. The French president is vowing to fight on, even if his party suffers losses in the snap general election, he called. Emmanuel Macron says dissolving parliament was the only response to the far-right's strong showing in last weekend's European elections. He insists the vote will bring clarity, although polls put the right-wing leader Marine Le Pen in first place, with Macron trailing in third. He's urging political rivals to join him by forging a democratic alliance against Le Pen's national rally. And Co-op Bank has apologised after customers complained of a glitch that saw payments taken twice from some small business account holders. People took to social media to vent their annoyance, with one claiming they were £5,000 out of pocket with no resolution in sight. A spokesperson for Co-op has apologised and says a correction's being processed. And CCTV footage has been released of a man caught stealing a Victorian brass eagle lectern worth £6,000 from a church in Edgbaston. If you're watching on TV, you can see he approaches the lectern, removes it from the column and covers it in a blanket before calmly strolling off. West Midlands Police are investigating the theft, which happened in just 2 minutes in broad daylight. I'll get the latest by scanning for our GB News alerts. The QR code's on your screen. The details are on our website.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Yes, let's take a quick look at the markets. The pound buys you $1.2828, 1.1856 euros. The price of gold is £1,811.13 per ounce. The FTSE 100 is at 8,216 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Aaron. Now, in a few minutes, we're discussing record low voter confidence in the UK political system and who can blame them. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to the West Midlands. Firstly, the southbound M42 at Junction 6. That's the turn-off for Coventry and Birmingham Airport. Now, still queuing. There were emergency repairs ongoing. They've now been sorted out. All lanes open. Queuing, though, back in patches towards Coleshill. That's Junction 7. Norfolk and Kings Lynn, the westbound A47, blocked from the Terrible roundabout through towards the pullover roundabout towards the A17. An obstruction causing queues this lunchtime. Clockwise M25 slow, just after Enfield 25. There was a breakdown. That's now being cleared, but of course it's in the roadworks. Patchy queues back towards South Mims Junction 23. And Isleworth in London, the London Road to the A315. Shut if you're heading between Spring Grove Road and Bridge Road and queuing. There's an incident there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Joint CEO at the UK Sepsis Trust, Dr. Ron Daniels. Very good to see you this morning. Why is it with sepsis we sort of hear very little about it in day-to-day life until there's either a big story or a big tragedy? Why is that? Is it common?
Well, it's astonishing, isn't it? We have a condition here that affects nearly 250,000 people across the UK each year and claims 48,000 lives. And just for context, breast cancer, and I'm not diminishing how horrible that can be, claims 11,000 lives. So sepsis is 4 times more prolific as a killer. I think the reason we don't hear about it is because it doesn't really belong to any particular speciality of doctors. It touches every aspect of healthcare, and therefore there's no professional group to be championing it, which means it needs an advocacy organisation like ours.
My understanding is that it's when your own immune system starts to attack the tissues, but by the time people realise that their temperature isn't just flu or something, they can often be in quite a perilous state.
It arises in people of any age, people with whether or not they've got underlying illness, and it can arise as a consequence of any infection. So it presents hugely differently.
So what do we do?
If you're concerned something is devastatingly wrong, there are 6 key symptoms to look for, and they spell the word sepsis. S for slurred speech or confusion. E for extreme pain in the muscles or joints. P for passing no urine, no water in a day. S for severe breathlessness. I for it feels like I'm going to die, and people really do say that. And then the final S for skin that's mottled or discoloured or very pale. Any one of those 6 in the context of infection, it's go straight to A&E.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you.
we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, the Green Party has launched its election manifesto today with a promise to raise taxes for the wealthiest in society and to ensure that no one is scared to put the kettle on. They've also launched plans to boost health and social care spending by £50 billion per year. And here is their co-leader, Adrian Ramsey, speaking earlier today, where he promised that the Green MPs would pressure a Labour government to be braver.
Because with more Green MPs in Parliament, we will push Labour to stop backtracking on their promises. We will be there to drive them to be braver, to be more ambitious, not to take timid baby steps towards change, but to actually do what's necessary to fix our country and get us back on track.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is GB News' national reporter Theo Chikomba. Theo, welcome to the show. So the Greens only have one MP. They'd like to have more. Tell us, what's their plan to get more in?
Well, they've made some bold pledges today, actually, here when they launched their manifesto in Brighton. And they are looking to spend an extra £50 billion on the NHS and social care. But of course, they mentioned a range of issues today during their manifesto, from housing, security, and much more, to see whether they can make a change. But interestingly, from the very beginning, actually, as we've just heard in that clip, they were quick to say, we're not expecting to get into number 10, but what we are going to do is push Labour to meet some of those pledges that they are making. But they have a number of issues, just first of all, in their own party. There are some reports at the moment that they've had to look into and investigate some claims of anti-Semitism within their party. We understand around 20 candidates are being looked into, although Adrian did confirm that around 4 of them had been fully investigated. But those numbers, we're not quite sure how many, but it's reportedly around 20. And of course, in the last hour or so, we've heard from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who commented on their pledges that they've made in their manifesto. They're saying the Green Party are looking to nationalise some of these things which we've seen in recent times, particularly the state of public services, the struggles that people are having to get places, for example, in the dentists, in their local areas. But they are saying it's unlikely that the measures, the tax measures they want to implement will meet some of these pledges that they've said. And they've said that their claim, it's certainly not without real economic cost. And then just briefly, in terms of taxes, which has been an issue which has been raised over the last couple of weeks, they said they would raise national insurance to 8% to those who are earning just over £50,000. And then they would also introduce a 1% wealth tax on assets over £10 million and 2% on over £1 billion. And then we go on to the issue of housing. They're saying they want to build around 150,000 homes every single year, which is half of what the Conservatives pledged in their 2019 manifesto. But interestingly, in the last couple of years, they haven't reached that target, which is just over 200,000 houses, which have been built per year in the last couple of years. And then climate is another issue. They're saying they want to pump in £40 billion to shift the green economy. And they say they will drive fossil fuels out of our economy and raise investment for that green transition. But when we hear analysis from economists, they say, while it is a good idea, the way they would be able to fund this is certainly going to affect the pockets of people right across the country. Now, of course, for voters, they'll be hoping that things like getting access to the NHS, dental services and more, those key essential public services, will be something they'll be looking to consider whether or not the Greens are actually serious about this and whether they can actually fund them.
And Theo Chicomba, just to add to that, they also want £2.5 billion for walking and cycling. They want to ban petrol cars by 2035 and, of course, get rid of all nuclear weapons. Theo Chicomba, thanks for joining us live from Hove. Now we'll be discussing the analysis finding that we have now have record low voter confidence in our political and electoral system from the man behind the research. That's Sir John Curtis. After this, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's not warm out there, but for most of us it's a fine day and the winds are a bit lighter than yesterday, so it feels at least a little bit warmer. The weather's on the change though, a couple of weather systems on their way in from the Atlantic. That's for tomorrow, but as I say, for the rest of today, most places set fair. There are a few showers still across northeast Scotland, one or two across eastern England as well, but they're tending to fade away. For many, it's a fine evening and we'll see the cloud melting away. So for quite a few of us, it'll be a largely clear night, and that will allow it to turn quite chilly. Temperatures well down into single digits once more, down to 3 or 4 in many rural spots. Out west, though, temperatures will actually start to rise later in the night as the cloud arrives from those weather systems, bringing outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland. Eventually, that rain will spread into Scotland, but for much of tomorrow, northern Scotland will stay dry and fine. Still 1 or 2 showers close by to Shetland. Here is that rain, though, edging into Northern Ireland for the morning rush hour, so a soggy start here. Getting quite windy, too, especially on the east coast of Northern Ireland. The west coast of Wales and the southwest of England will see the winds steadily picking up as well. Many central and eastern parts having a dry, fine, if somewhat chilly start to the day. The cloud will increase over the Midlands and then into eastern England as the rain spreads into Wales, southwest England by lunchtime, southwest Scotland up towards the central belt by the end of the day, and also come the middle of the afternoon, some of that rain getting into the Midlands. Much of eastern England will stay dry until quite late on, and same goes for northern Scotland. But in the west, getting very, very windy as well as wet. These western coasts particularly gusty for this time of year. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with the wind and the rain, which will continue to spread into eastern England and eventually into northern Scotland during the course of tomorrow evening. And the blustery and showery outlook will continue. Some sunny spells, but lots of heavy showers through the weekend. Temperatures a little higher, but feeling cooler with the gusty winds.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Time is 3:47. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, throughout the election campaign, we'll be hearing from people across the United Kingdom about what really matters to them. Issues such as NHS waiting lists, the impact of immigration, the cost of living crisis and crime and policing. Our reporters have been to meet voters from all 4 nations and we'll be hearing from them regularly before polling day. And today, for the first time, we meet David Lee from Mansfield.
I'm David Lee, I'm 45 from Mansfield. The biggest issue for me is basically putting money back into people's pockets. Shops are closing, people are out of jobs, and the regeneration of a place like this is really needed. I'm a business owner, I've got a small shoe repair shop. I've got to put my prices up because my costs everywhere have gone up. So to put money back into people's pockets, lower taxes, and get more shops open. That's what I want to see in a place like this. I think people around here feel disillusioned with politics, with government. They talk about all this money that this town's being given to level up, and our money is going to be given to the places in the north to level up. But what levelling up has happened in Mansfield? This marketplace, it used to be full of stalls. Now, as you look at it, there's an handful of stalls. Mansfield has always been Labour. You put a red ribbon on a donkey round here and it would have got in. But then we come to 2017 and it switched allegiances and it went Conservative. And I think a big reason for that was obviously Brexit. In the past, I voted for Labour, for Conservative, even for UKIP. But at the moment, I'm on the fence of which way I'm going to vote. And I'm not going to look at Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer on which one of those I'm going to vote for, or even the other parties. I'm going to look at what the politicians say they're going to do for my town, Mansfield.
Well, this comes as analysis by the electoral expert Sir John Curtis has found that trust and confidence in the UK's politics and election system has never been worse. And his report found that a record numbers of voters said they almost never trust governments to put country before party or politicians to even tell the truth. And Sir John Curtis joins us now. Sir John, it's always a delight to have you on the show. The title of your report, Damaged Politics, says it all. Please tell us some of the shocking detail.
Well, as you've already just outlined, Martin, we've got record levels of distrust in government and politicians, and more people, at least as many people as ever, saying that they think our system of government should be reformed. So just to put a little bit of flesh on those bones, we now have 45% of people saying they almost never trust government to put the interests of the country before those of their own party. That is a record high. It's well up on the 38% or so back in 2019. We've got 58% of people saying that you can't trust politicians to tell the truth where they're in a tight corner, and that's close to being a record high. And we've got nearly 80% of people saying the system of government needs to reform. There is one group in particular amongst whom things have changed, and this in a sense is a part of a wider story of the last Parliament. So the delivery of Brexit in the immediate wake of the 2019 election saw those who voted leave in the 2016 referendum come up with much higher levels of trust and confidence they previously had. There was a marked increase. So, for example, before the delivery of Brexit, only around 17% of them thought that system of government didn't need much improvement. That went up to 41% after the delivery of Brexit. And it's similar for attitudes towards levels of trust. But many a Leave voter, even if they still support Brexit, are disappointed with the outcome. Around 2 in 5 of them think that the economy is worse off as a result. Nearly a half think that it's resulted in an increase in immigration. And those folk in particular have now reversed their attitude towards Britain's system of government. They are the ones above all who've become again much more distrustful and much more thinking that we should be changing the system of government.
And so, John, this plays out with a great fascination into the current general election because, of course, those people who voted to leave, they saw 4 years of politicians trying to frustrate, in fact, even to reverse their vote. And then when Brexit got done, they saw immigration, all those things you mentioned, actually get worse. These are the people, Sir John, who are just simply switching off. These are the people like Dave there from Mansfield who just says, I've tried all the parties. None of them seem to do anything. What's the point? We've got a huge problem, haven't we, of trust and even engaging apathy being the massive enemy.
Well, whether or not this is apathy is perhaps another matter. I think the way I would put it is that, once you put it together with the fact that we're very concerned about the state of the health service, which again is one of the reasons why trust and confidence is low, why so many people are struggling are on low incomes. And also, frankly, the political turmoil we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years. You put all this together, you certainly get a look of an electorate that is certainly concerned about the state of the country and are just wondering, doubtful, whether or not the politicians could turn it around, or at least they're necessarily being honest during this election campaign about what might be needed in order to turn things around. And to that extent, at least, it does raise a question of credibility for all of our politicians as they're out there trying to campaign for a vote. So I'm not sure in the end politicians will stay away, but the message that they may want to be feeding back to their politicians may not be always one that they want to hear.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Fascinating of damage policies reports to John Curtis there, its author. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, don't go anywhere, because in the next hour we'll be discussing whether the Tories have accepted another electoral defeat. The supermajority from the Labour Party, it seems they've all but thrown in the towel. Is that what you believe? Let us know. gbnews.com/your slay. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. But before all of that, it's your weather, and it's Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's not warm out there, but for most of us it's a fine day, and the winds are a bit lighter than yesterday, so it feels at least a little bit warmer. The weather's on the change, though. A couple of weather systems on their way in from the Atlantic. That's for tomorrow. But as I say, for the rest of today, most places set fair. There are a few showers still across northeast Scotland, one or two across eastern England as well, but they're tending to fade away. For many, it's a fine evening, and we'll see the cloud melting away. So for quite a few of us, it'll be a largely clear night, and that will allow it to turn quite chilly. Temperatures well down into single digits once more, down to 3 or 4 in many rural spots. Out west, though, temperatures will actually start to rise later in the night as the cloud arrives from those weather systems, bringing outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland. Eventually, that rain will spread into Scotland, but for much of tomorrow, northern Scotland will stay dry and fine. Still 1 or 2 showers close by to Shetland. Here is that rain, though, edging into Northern Ireland for the morning rush hour, so a soggy start here. Getting quite windy, too, especially on the east coast of Northern Ireland. The west coast of Wales and the southwest of England will see the winds steadily picking up as well. Many central and eastern parts having a dry, fine, if somewhat chilly start to the day. The cloud will increase over the Midlands and then into eastern England as the rain spreads into Wales, southwest England by lunchtime, southwest Scotland up towards the central belt by the end of the day, and also come the middle of the afternoon, some of that rain getting into the Midlands. Much of eastern England will stay dry until quite late on, and same goes for northern Scotland. But in the west, getting very, very windy as well as wet. These western coasts particularly gusty for this time of year. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with the wind and the rain, which will continue to spread into eastern England and eventually into northern Scotland during the course of tomorrow evening. And the blustery and showery outlook will continue. Some sunny spells, but lots of heavy showers through the weekend. Temperatures a little higher, but feeling cooler with the gusty winds.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Fife. Firstly, in Scotland, where the A914 is shut in Muirhead, closed between the New Inn roundabout off the A92 and the Star turn-off. A collision there is causing queues. Bradford in West Yorkshire, the Leeds Road, the A647 shut between the A6177 and Thornbury Road and queuing. There's a police incident. Staying in West Yorkshire, between Streethouse and Featherstone, the Wakefield Road, the eastbound side of the A645 has been closed off. A collision there is causing delays. London Road in Isleworth in London, the A315, that's shut between Spring Grove Road and Thornbury Road as emergency services there deal with an incident. And in Carmarthenshire in South Wales, the A40 southwest of Llandovery around Llanwrda is closed and queuing. That's due to a collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the House of Westminster all across the UK. Today, the Tories appeared to all but throw in the towel when Grant Shapps warned the Labour supermajority would put the UK in a dangerous place. Is this the most extraordinary act of political surrender in British history? I'll speak to a minister for his thoughts shortly. 12-year-olds murdering with machetes, 46% of British teens terrified of knives, including 31% scared of blades inside their own schools. Throughout today's show, I'll ask some of the UK's foremost experts, how do we stamp out the cancer of knife crime? And an astonishing new poll called Damage Politics has shown record low levels of trust in British politicians. Incredibly, a record 58% said they almost never trust politicians of any party to tell the truth when they are in a tight corner. How on earth did politics become so broken? That's all coming up in your next hour. On the show, always a delight to have your company. Now, a short while ago, I spoke to Sir John Curtis, the legendary political analyst who did that report, Damaged Politics. The figures are simply eye-watering. 45% said they almost never trusted governments to put the needs of the country first. Leave voters being the most disillusioned. 48% of Leave voters almost never trust politicians at all, and that's doubled since 2020. I want to hear from you today. Did you vote for Brexit, and now have you lost all faith in politics and politicians to deliver on their promises? If so, why? I want to hear your stories. Why have you completely lost faith in politics? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thanks very much indeed, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom is that Rishi Sunak insists he hasn't given up hope of winning the election, but he has warned voters not to give Labour a blank cheque. The Prime Minister was campaigning in East Lincolnshire today as new figures showed the economy stagnated during April with zero growth. It's something of a setback for the Prime Minister and his recent claim that the UK economy had turned a corner. The Tories pointed, though, to figures that demonstrated the economy had grown in the previous 3 months. But the Liberal Democrats say Rishi Sunak has utterly failed to deliver on his promises, while Sir Keir Starmer says Labour's plan will renew the country.
The one thing that everybody expected and needed from Rishi Sunak was stability after the disaster of Liz Truss. What he's now done is become the latest version of Liz Truss with unfunded commitments. And I think the public know, voters know, that there's a cost to that and they want an alternative. And that's why I'm really pleased that tomorrow in our manifesto we will take a different approach. We will set out the case for growth, for rebuilding, for putting our nation first to go forward.
It's Keir Starmer. Now, as you've been hearing, a record number of people have lost faith in British politics. That's according to the electoral expert Sir John Curtis. The analysis found trust and confidence in politics and the overall election system has never been lower. 45% of respondents almost never believe that governments of any party are fully focused on the challenges facing the country. And a record 58% said they almost never trust politicians of any party to tell the truth. That's a 19-point increase from 2020. Meanwhile, the French president is vowing to fight on, even if his party suffers losses in his snap election. Emmanuel Macron says dissolving parliament was the only possible response to the gains made by right-wing parties in last weekend's European elections. He insists the election will bring clarity, though polls put right-wing leader Marine Le Pen in first place, with Macron trailing third. The French president has urged his political rivals to join him by forging a democratic alliance against Le Pen's national rally. The US Secretary of State says some of the latest changes put forward by the terror group Hamas for a ceasefire proposal in Gaza are unworkable, meaning the war will continue. Antony Blinken's been studying the latest demands alongside mediators in Qatar. It's understood Hamas will only accept President Biden's deal if it gets written guarantees from the United States over a permanent ceasefire and withdrawal from Israeli forces from Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's military now says around 160 rockets have been fired into the north of the country from Lebanon. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Here in the UK, 2 men have denied chopping down the famous Sycamore Gap tree at Hadrian's Wall last year. 31-year-old Adam Carruthers is accused of causing £622,000 worth of damage when the tree was felled. A second man, 38-year-old Daniel Graham, was unavoidably detained and did not appear in court today, but has previously entered a not guilty plea. The tree was a popular attraction for visitors and stood in a dramatic dip in Northumberland for more than 2 centuries until it was cut down in September, sparking a national outcry. The Co-op Bank has had to apologise to customers after they complained of a glitch that saw payments taken twice from some small business account holders. People took to social media to vent their frustration, with one claiming they were £5,000 out of pocket with no resolution in sight. Another said their account had been in overdraft all day, but they hadn't had any notifications from the bank. A spokesperson for the cooperative apologised and said a correction is currently being processed. Flights are grounded in Mallorca today after heavy rain caused flooding at Spain's third busiest airport. Video posted to social media shows water spilling into a parking area, while some cars could be seen partially submerged outside the terminal. Spain's weather agency has recorded 5 centimetres of rain an hour, with peaks of up to 9 centimetres. The Mediterranean island is famous for its picturesque beaches and sunny weather and is particularly popular among British tourists. And CCTV footage has been released of a man caught stealing a Victorian brass eagle lectern worth around £6,000 from a church in Edgbaston. The lectern is thought to date back to 1868, which is when the church officially opened. If you're watching on TV, you can see the man approaching the lectern, removing it from the column and then covering it in a blanket before calmly just making his way out of the church. West Midlands police are investigating the theft, which happened in just 2 minutes in broad daylight. Those are the latest news headlines. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, there's still 3 weeks to go until the general election, but there's a huge question over the Conservatives. had they already thrown in the towel? Well, it comes after the Defence Secretary warned the electorate over handing Keir Starmer a supermajority, whatever that means. Back on the campaign trail, Rishi Sunak insisted that he had not given up on a Conservative victory. And all this comes ahead of another clash tonight between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer as they go head-to-head in their second TV debate. Well, we can now speak with GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope, who has been with the Prime Minister on the campaign trail today. Chris, you're coming back towards London on the train there. It's got to say, it feels like the Tory campaign in itself is hitting the end of the line. Talking about a supermajority, not if we're going to win, how bad the defeat is going to be. It's hardly inspiring stuff, is it?
No, and hi Martin, welcome. I'm good to be back on the show. Yeah, I'm charging towards London. I've been in the studio with you for 5 days. I've been with the Prime Minister in northeast of England, in Grimsby, where he's facing an audience tonight in a TV event with warnings that Labour would win a Shapps, Defence Secretary, suggested as much. What that means, by the way, is a very big majority, maybe over 3 figures, one which will take the Tory.
OK, the thing about Chris, he's on a train there, and if only we had decent Wi-Fi on trains, that would be a surefire vote winner. I know for myself, and it's impossible to get a signal to do the most basic of things. We can put a man on the moon, we can't do a phone call on a train. But I was going to put it to Chris Hope there. Some extraordinary statistics out today. A poll shows that 25% of those who voted Conservative in 2019, the Get Brexit Done election, they think the Conservative Party deserves to lose every single seat. A quarter of Tory voters want the Tories to get no MPs. This is an astonishing situation, and 46% of all voters think the Tories deserve to lose every single seat. Things have really changed since 2019, an election I took part in as a candidate. Then it was, we have to keep Jeremy Corbyn out of power. It seems now Conservative voters, or at least a good rump of them, they actually want to punish the Conservatives. They feel as if this is an election. They need to taste pain to reset the party. Who would have thought we'd be in this situation after 2019? That 80-seat majority seems so long ago now. Chris Hope is on his way back to London. He'll be in the studio, I'm hoping, at the top of the next hour. We've been thwarted by the perils of poor Wi-Fi this hour, but I'm now joined by the political commentator and the economic commentator, Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. You may have overheard there some astonishing statistics. Conservative voters themselves seem to be wishing pain upon their own party. Grant Shapps talking about the super majority. We've seen candidates, Conservative candidates today, campaigning, not with pictures of Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak on their literature, but with pictures of Nigel Farage. Jamie, does it seem like the Tories have just given up?
Yeah, I think it's coming back to 1997 and 2010 all over again, Mark. I think what you can see in the general election campaign so far, it's not a case of people are looking to the Labour Party to deliver something brand new for Britain. It's pretty much what we got at the back end of the John Major government and the Gordon Brown, Tony Blair era, where the country's just exhausted with what we've seen over the last 14 years from the Tories. And it's more a case of the country wants change. They don't want the Conservatives. They want something different. Whether Keir Starmer's going to offer a blueprint which is completely different is a separate question. But it's quite clear that the public have just lost complete faith in what we currently got under Rishi Sunak.
Do you think, Jamie, there's something else, and that is the current political landscape seems to be so negative? If you think back to the 2019 general election, it was get Brexit done. Whether you agree with that or not, it offered a vision of optimism, of getting the country moving again. The European election the previous summer, one I took part in, that was about taking back control, Britain, striving towards a greater future. Now, it seems, all the two main parties are saying as well, if you think it's bad now, it'll be much worse under this other lot.
Yeah, there's nothing really cutting through in terms of what people will do, because if you take the Tory manifesto this week, they're saying you need to stick with us if you want to bring immigration down, and we've seen record levels of immigration. Stick with us if you want taxes come down, and we've seen record levels of taxation. So can you really trust the current government to kind of go back on some of the promises that they've made in the past? So that's difficult. And then what's the Labour Party offering? They're, some of the fringe policies they're talking about in terms of putting VAT on private schools. They all talk, Martin, about not putting up income tax, VAT, national insurance, and I know the Tories have talked about cutting it. But what you've got to remember is the fiscal drag that we've seen over the last decade, which I'm sure will continue under the next government, where your wages go up, so you go over the kind of the tax threshold. So actually everybody's going to get a tax increase because of fiscal drag. Nobody's promising to uprate the income tax threshold and the national insurance thresholds with wages, Martin. So it's just going to get worse for people in terms of taxation. And there's nothing really positive coming through in the campaign so far.
Yeah, totally. No income tax, no VAT, no money back, no guarantee. It's all starting to feel like fools and horses, Jamie Jenkins, but without the jokes. Talking of which, this report out today, an astonishing report from Sir John Curtis called Damaged Politics. The lack of trust that voters have in politicians at a record low. Some astonishing numbers, Jamie. 45% almost never trust governments of any political stripe to put the needs of the country above the needs of their own party. The most cynical are Leave voters. 48% of them almost never trust any of them to get anything done. Are we at a point, Jamie, where the none of the above party is simply the most attractive now? We've had so many electoral cycles of broken promises, of a lack of competence, of squandered majorities, of broken promises, of failing to meet targets. People just are now saying, I just don't believe any of you.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity there, Martin. If somebody did launch the none of the above party, put any candidates in, they might get a landslide when people turn up at the polling booth. And it's not surprising that what you've talked about with what the voters think, because where I live in Wales, where Welsh Labour have been running the country for 25 years. Last week, the First Minister, Vaughan Gething, there was a vote of no confidence in him as First Minister. He's come out over the weekend saying, I want a fresh start. He's not looking at adhering to that vote, and all of that came off the back of receiving £200,000 donations for his political campaign to get elected from a convicted criminal on environmental thing. So the public want him out. He doesn't want to go out. So no wonder the public generally across the rest of the UK, as is in Wales, is fed up with politicians. And it'll be interesting to see what the turnout is like for the next election, Martin, I think.
Yeah, do you think that Brexit was a moment? I've been asking people watching and listening today to get in touch with the moment they more or less gave up on politicians. I wonder if Brexit was a tipping point, Jamie, where we put our faith in our elected individuals. OK, like it or lump it, we voted this way. Get the job done. We had 4 years of watching them trying to overturn that vote, trying to have a second referendum, trying to crush it. And then did we get Brexit done, or have we failed to deliver on things like fishing, on border control, on taking back control of our money and sovereignty? And has all of this, Jamie, precipitated this landscape of I just don't trust any of you anymore?
Yeah, well, obviously, one of the key threads of the Brexit vote was to kind of take back control of the borders. And since the Brexit referendum, and since we've actually left the European Union, we've seen this record level of immigration. Rishi Sunak talks about stopping the boats. Well, the numbers this year are higher than in any year. And he's still failing to rule out perhaps coming out of the ECHR if that's going to be an impact on that. So the promises that were made over the Brexit referendum haven't been put through, by the politicians that are in charge. There's opportunities to do that, Martin. But I think, there's many people who are fed up with politicians. What Brexit did do is started engaging people who hadn't engaged with politics to come out and vote in the referendum. I think some of them came out and voted in the European elections after that, I think, for the Brexit Party. But ultimately, we had this big majority for Boris Johnson. He got kicked out. Rishi Sunak hasn't really taken things forward. It's going to be concerning to see what happens over the next 4 or 5 years if we do get a Starmer government, but that's looking like where we're heading.
Yeah, I mean, everyone sensible money thinks this election is all but over. Looking ahead, one of the interesting things to come out of this Sir John Curtis report, Damaged Politics, Jamie, is people think that the system itself simply doesn't allow parties to get a toehold. The first past the post means we swing between Labour and the Conservatives, whether we like it or not. Smaller parties very much struggle. 53% when they were asked said it's time to change the system, to go to a more European-style system, dare I say it, of proportional representation. Those elections, of course, when the Brexit Party got 29 MEPs in. Sounds great, but the big parties would never allow that. Well, they like continuity politics.
Yeah, I think the fairest system is to have proportional representation. And I think the Green Party, if we put them in together, because they've launched their manifesto today, they've got one MP. They'll probably get more than kind of a small percent of the vote, but they won't get anywhere probably where near reform is. But these smaller parties do actually have some leeway when you get proportional representation, because you don't get majority governments. But we could have a scenario where of the popular vote, the Reform Party take the polls of the current state, Martin, gets exactly the same vote as the Conservative Party, but may have 1 or 2 MPs, whereas the Conservative Party may be 50, 60, 70 MPs based on the current polling. So there's something not right, and that's what cuts through to the public when they think, I live in a safe seat. There's no point in me going to vote because my vote won't matter. If you want to get people engaged with politics, every vote needs to count. So moving to that proportional representation system is the way to go. But you're right, the current two-party state, will any of them ever want to change or get away from that? I very much doubt it.
Well, Jamie Jenkins, there's 23 long days to go yet. Thank you very much for help keeping me sane and helping me smile. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Jamie Jenkins. Always a pleasure to have you. Now, meanwhile, there are question marks over whether we can expect tax rises and Labour's manifesto to be announced, of course, tomorrow. And here's what Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer had to say about that when he was asked about it earlier today.
All of our plans are fully costed, fully funded. There will be no increase in income tax, in national insurance or VAT. And we'll launch our manifesto tomorrow. There'll be no tax surprises, and none of our plans require tax rises over and above the rises that we've already set out. But what you will see tomorrow is a plan for the future of the country, a manifesto that sets out how we will rebuild and renew the country and sets out the first steps that we will take in government on day one to set us down that path of renewal and rebuilding. So it'll be a very different manifesto to the one that the Tories unveiled yesterday.
Well, we are, of course, the People's Channel, and throughout the election campaign, we'll be hearing from people across the United Kingdom about what really matters to them. Big issues such as NHS waiting lists, the impact of immigration, the cost of living crisis and crime and policing. Well, our reporters have been to meet voters from all 4 nations and we'll be hearing from them regularly before polling day. And today, for the first time, we meet David Lee from Mansfield.
I'm David Lee, I'm 45 from Mansfield. The biggest issue for me is basically putting money back into people's pockets. Shops are closing, people are out of jobs, and the regeneration of a place like this is really needed. I'm a business owner, I've got a small shoe repair shop. I've got to put my prices up because my costs everywhere have gone up. So to put money back into people's pockets, lower taxes, and get more shops open. That's what I want to see in a place like this. I think people around here feel disillusioned with politics, with government. They talk about all this money that this town's being given to level up, and our money is going to be given to the places in the north to level up. But what levelling up has happened in Mansfield? This marketplace, it used to be full of stalls. Now, as you look at it, there's an handful of stalls. Mansfield has always been Labour. You put a red ribbon on a donkey round here and it would have got in. But then we come to 2017 and it switched allegiances and it went Conservative. And I think a big reason for that was obviously Brexit. In the past, I voted for Labour, for Conservative, even for UKIP. But at the moment, I'm on the fence of which way I'm going to vote, and I'm not going to look at Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer on which one of those I'm going to vote for, or even the other parties. I'm going to look at what the politicians say they're going to do for my town, Mansfield.
Now, I've lots more on that story, of course, at 5 o'clock, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, time now for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to make this summer really special with over £16,000 worth of prizes to be won. That's 15 grand, tax-free cash and a whole host of treats on top. Now, you've got to be in it to win it, and here's all the details that you need to enter.
We're making this summer funner with 3 incredible prizes to be won. First, a fantastic £15,000 in tax-free cash that you can spend on anything you like. Next, there's the latest iPhone 15 with a brand new set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. The summer fun could be on us. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff. Now, don't go anywhere, because soon I'll be speaking with a Conservative Minister, Tom Tugendhat, about those extraordinary comments from Grant Shapps about a supermajority for Sir Keir Starmer. Have the Tories simply given up? I'll put it to him next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As he kissed her goodbye with...
Ian Phoenix was in charge of a counter-terrorism group dedicated to bringing peace to Northern Ireland. He was a husband and a father.
He was a real Irishman. He had the twinkly Irish eyes. He enjoyed a good joke. He liked a good glass of wine.
Susan Phoenix first heard of the accident that killed her husband on her car radio.
I was just driving along, going, no, no, no. I can still see it. I can still feel it, even 30 years on.
On the 2nd of June, 1994, the Chinook helicopter that was taking them to a peace conference crashed into the side of a mountain on the Mull of Kintyre, killing 4 crew and 25 of the country's top counter-terrorism experts. At a board of inquiry, the Ministry of Defence concluded there was no doubt whatsoever the accident had been caused by the gross negligence of the 2 pilots, Flight Lieutenants Richard Cook and Jonathan Tapper. But there was doubt. Plenty of it. There were no eyewitnesses on that foggy night, no flight data recorder, no voice recorder. It took until 2011 for the Ministry of Defence to admit they had not a shred of evidence. At the time of the crash, systematic errors in the software that controlled the engines had been reported. The MOD had seen its safety budget slashed in the run-up to the accident. In a statement, the Ministry of Defence told GB News, in 2010, the Mull of Kintyre independent review was carried out and the findings were fully accepted. The review did not find new evidence to suggest mechanical failure, and no safety issues with the Chinook Mark II were raised in the report. This weekend, the families have formed the Chinook Justice Campaign. But justice may never come.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:27. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Sir Ed Davey was back in the water again today to promote the Lib Dems' tougher proposed water regulations. And the Liberal Democrat leader, as you can see, plunged into a lake in Warwickshire to promote his plans for a clean water authority to replace Ofwat as a regulator of private water. There he goes, poof, chocks away. You know, for a guy that worries a lot about sewage, he spent a lot of time on his campaign trail plopping into the water. Now, this is just one of a series of stunts since he started campaigning, including, of course, paddleboarding on Lake Windermere, looking around for floating voters, and visiting a slip and slide in Somerset. In fact, I think he's about to try and do a gladiator leap. Here he goes, clambering over a net, looking very much like one of the world's worst gladiators. Here he goes. I think he's going to try and go into the monkey rings, is he? Here we go, and another spectacular flop. At least that's a politician who's making something of a splash. Seems to be working, though. He's having a merry time. It's like a big adventure to him. And the Liberal Democrat leader was also asked for his thoughts on the UK GDP figures, which came out today.
The time ticks away from Rishi Sunak and his premiership as he has his last few days in office. I'm afraid the economy is petering too. The Conservatives promised to grow the economy, to make it more prosperous, and they failed utterly. And whether it's the cost of living, which has hit people so hard, with the energy bills, the rent, the mortgages, the food bills, and the Conservatives have done nothing to help with that, or whether it's the economy not growing properly. The Conservatives have so mismanaged our economy, from Liz Truss's appalling mini-budget to Rishi Sunak's failures. They should get out of the way, and Liberal Democrats have some really attractive, positive ideas to rebuild our economy and help people with the cost of living.
Now, meanwhile, visiting an Asda supermarket in Edinburgh, SNP leader John Swinney says a poll which forecasts the SNP on 27 seats at the general election is encouraging.
This visit to Asda illustrates to me just the challenges that people are wrestling with about the cost of living, and it's important to listen to the reflections of the staff on the work that they're doing to support people through really difficult times. And of course that complements what the Scottish Government is doing, where we're taking a range of measures, whether it's about maintaining free prescriptions, or about introducing free bus travel for under 22s, or the Scottish Child Payment that's keeping 100,000 children out of poverty, which are measures which are designed to support families who are facing real challenges at this time. But what's important is that when I look at the performance of other small European countries, independent countries, I see them delivering a stronger economic performance and stronger public finances than the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom model is broken. It is absolutely broken. And the false debate that we're having in this election campaign is demonstrating that. I'm trying to say in this election campaign that there's £18 billion worth of spending cuts that essentially are baked into the Conservatives' projections about the future of the economy, and the Labour Party accepts that. And we cannot bear any more austerity within Scotland. But people need to know that if a Labour government gets elected, they will be continuing the austerity of the Tories. Well, obviously the Scottish Government will set out its material in due course about a whole range of different questions. We can't do that during a UK general election campaign because the guidance won't allow us to do it, but we will do that in due course to set out the strengths and the advantages of Scotland being an independent country. The D-Day commemorations in Normandy will go down for me as one of the most significant days of my time as First Minister, and for however long that lasts, because you cannot observe the 80th anniversary of D-Day, encounter veterans and not be overwhelmed by the sacrifice that they made. And to be an observer there was an extraordinary privilege. So every moment I spent there was absolutely precious, and I would have spent even more time there if it was possible to do so, because the experience was utterly overwhelming and a huge privilege, and I'm a bit surprised that wasn't reflected in the Prime Minister's comments.
That's John Swinney in Asda today. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, and we really do need to talk about knife crime, following on from the shocking murder of Sean Sahai by two 12-year-old boys, which comes as a survey today claims that 46% of British teens are scared of knife crime, including an astonishing 31% scared of blades inside their own schools. Much to discuss. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. But first, it's your news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour on GB News. Rishi Sunak's been insisting he hasn't given up hope of winning the election, but he has warned voters not to give Labour a blank cheque. The Prime Minister was campaigning at a school in North East Lincolnshire as new figures showed the economy stagnated in April. That's something of a setback for the Prime Minister and his recent claim the economy had turned a corner. But the Tories have pointed to figures that demonstrate the economy had grown in the previous 3 months. The Lib Dems say Rishi Sunak has utterly failed to deliver on his promises, and Sir Keir Starmer says Labour's plan will renew the country. Chronic numbers of potholes would be fixed under a new plan by the Labour Party. They say Tory cuts have led to poorly maintained roads, causing damage to cars and contributing to higher insurance premiums. The party's promising to direct special funding to councils to fix 1 million potholes every year and says Labour will turn the tide of neglect. And as you've been hearing, Scotland's First Minister says there should be another referendum on Scottish independence in the next 5 years. Joining SNP candidate Joanna Cherry on a visit to a supermarket in Edinburgh, John Swinney denied suggestions he'd been downplaying the referendum in the election campaign. He said the issue of independence relates to the principal concerns of the Scottish people, including the cost of living and the implications of Brexit. And the French president is vowing to fight on, even though his party suffered losses, even if his party suffered losses in a snap election. Emmanuel Macron says dissolving parliament was the only possible response to the gain made by right-wing parties in last weekend's European elections. He insisted the vote would bring clarity, though polls put right-wing leader Marine Le Pen in first place, with centre-left Macron trailing in third. He's urging political rivals to join him by forging a democratic alliance against Le Pen's National Rally Party. Those are the headlines. For your latest top stories, sign up for GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, in a few minutes' time, I'll be speaking with Tory Minister Tom Tugendhat. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Fife in Scotland and Muirhead, the A914, currently closed between the Star turn-off and the New Inn roundabout for the A92, a collision causing congestion. Bradford, West Yorkshire next, Leeds Road, the A647, so that's shut between the A6177 and Thornbury Road. There's an ongoing police incident, so no way through, and we're seeing delays. A 5-mile queue southbound down the M6. Now lanes 1 and 2 out of 4 are combed off, Sandbach 17, heading south towards Crewe at 16. That's at the scene of a collision. And if you're heading for Gloucestershire on the southbound side of the M5, the stretch between Stroud at junction 13 towards Thornbury 14 currently has a lane combed off. There's a broken down vehicle there, so that's one to watch out for too. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Angela, what's on the menu?
Well, the menu today really is the battle between King Charles and Prince Andrew about his home, Royal Lodge. It's gone on for quite a long time now because increasingly the place looks very dilapidated. No paint, raw under the way that the whole thing's built, and it's. King Charles gives him £3 million a year to have safety, and also another $1 million just to keep it going, and it costs about £400,000 a month to keep the place going. Really? So it is ridiculous that he's there, and I think it's like anybody. If you get to a certain age, his daughters don't stay there because they stay in London, and you get to when you downgrade. And it's not a big deal, it's not hopeless, it's actually gives you a fresh feeling. And I think it's very silly that he won't do it, but he's determined not to, and the King is determined to. And it seems that if he doesn't listen and make all these decorations properly, that he's going to stop giving him the money, which would be very difficult indeed for him.
Because every 5 years, isn't he meant to paint the outside and all sorts of things?
And the Queen didn't give him much money in her will. It all goes to the heir. So Charles has got the money. And so, you just wonder how he'll manage, because he's only got, what he can do.
How he'll manage? He can move somewhere cheaper like the rest of us. I mean, £400,000 a month.
Yeah.
You could go to Frogmore Cottage, which is the offer.
Yes, exactly. That's the offer. And it's all been very decorated. Apparently Meghan did it very nicely. It's much smaller, but it's also very carefully guarded. So he should be able to do that.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Well, I'm delighted to announce I'm now joined by Security Minister Tom Tugendhat. Tom, welcome to the show. We have to talk about this Labour supermajority. It very much feels to people, Tom, that Grant Shapps has sent up the white flag. It's not talking about if the Tories have any chance of winning. It's now talking about how bad the defeat is going to be, and seems to be a desperate plea to get people to still stick with the Conservatives so you don't get wiped out. As a Minister of State for Security, this seems to be more now about job security.
No, it's absolutely not about that. Martin, look, it's lovely to see you again, as always. But you would not expect me to run up any white flags ever, and I'm not going to do it now. This is a fight to the line. It's a fight to the end, and we've got a hell of a lot of campaigning to go. We're about halfway through the campaign, so it's hardly surprising there's some bumps and bruises. That's pretty much the nature of an election for those of us who've been through one or two before, and you've followed a few before, Martin. I know that. You know that's kind of how they work. And there's a hell of a lot of talking to do. One of the things I'll tell you that I find, and I've been lucky enough to be out and about in my own patch before I was forced back in order to come and talk to you this afternoon. I've been meeting people here in the most beautiful constituency in the entire country, in West Kent. And, there's a lot of people who are supportive still. A lot of people are still very kind on the doorstep. And there's a lot of people who are undecided. And you can understand why they're undecided. We've been in for 14 years. There's many challenges. A lot of the decisions that we've taken in recent years still have to play out. And, we're seeing some of the advantages. If you look at Brexit, one of the advantages is we've got AI regulation, very separate from the European Union. But how long before you start to see the difference between AI feeding through in our hospitals, for example, different to Germany or France? Well, it's going to take a little while. Of course, it's going to take a little while. These are decisions that we have seeded already that are going to take a little while to grow fruit. And I can understand why people are in doubt. But really, the question that people have got to ask themselves, and you've been asking this yourself, Martin, I heard you, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the real choice is, frankly, do you want Keir Starmer in number 10? Because this is a guy who is not only not offering a plan, but you can see from his ethos what he actually thinks about things. Don't ask me. Listen to what he said. Ask yourself, do you want the guy who speaks about free movement of people to be the Prime Minister? Do you want the guy who isn't clear on whether terrorists should be able to come back to the UK to be in number 10? Do you want the guy who has also been appointing people who voted against our nuclear deterrent to be the guy who's responsible for the ultimate protection of the British people? Whether it's Shamima Begum or continuous at-sea deterrent, these are real choices that we've got to ask ourselves. And so you'll forgive me, Martin, I am not drawing up any white flags. I am fighting right up to the end, because this is far too important to concede on, and I will not give up.
Nevertheless, Tom, there has been a perceptible change in mindset amongst Conservative voters. I stood in the 2019 election. Conservatives were begging the Brexit Party candidates to stand aside, don't let Corbyn in. And yet today, some astonishing figures came out. 25% of Conservative voters in 2019 now want the Conservatives to lose every single seat. There seems to be an appetite, Tom Tugendhat, amongst your own voters to somehow reset reset the party. There's a feeling that Europe divided the party, net zero divides the party, immigration divides the party. There's a feeling I hear every single day that Conservative voters simply want the Conservatives to be conservative again.
So I agree with you that the Conservative Party has a responsibility to be arguing passionately for those things that really make us a great country. Now, part of that is our borders and our security, and I've touched on that, but part of it is also the economy. Now, we have to get taxes down, and that's exactly what we are promising. That's exactly the commitment we're making. But we can only make that commitment if we get over the line. Now, you don't need me to tell you, because you know it. What's Margaret Thatcher's great line? Socialists eventually run out of other people's money. And that's exactly what Keir Starmer is proposing to do. He wants to spend your money. He wants to spend at least £2,000 more of it. And we know those figures because those are the ones he's announced. And no doubt it's going to be more because he's going to find things that he wants to spend money on that he hasn't told us about yet. So these choices are absolutely fundamental. What are we going to do about keeping ourselves safer? How are we going to make the economy grow? And how are we going to make those arguments work? Now, Martin, I've seen polls too, but you will forgive me. I saw quite a lot of polls before 2016 that left quite a lot of people in the betting markets worse off. And you got it right. I've seen quite a lot of polls in 2019 that told us a very different result. And again, you got it right. So look, I trust the British people to make the right decision. I trust democracy, and I'm sure the British people will look at all the factors and weigh them up.
But then you use the spectre of socialism, Tom, but a lot of people are saying we have socialism now. We've got the highest taxes since World War II. We have de facto open borders.
So we have got to bring down taxes. I mean, there's not just me saying this. You can speak to anybody in the Conservative Party about that. The trouble we've had, and you don't need me to tell you about this either, frankly. You could do this interview yourself, Martin. The reality is we have had to spend £400 billion on COVID. You know this, and it's been a complete nightmare, and we have got to pay it down. You know, if we don't do it in a balanced way, all that we do is we force up people's interest rates because we mess around with the economy in a way that causes people to doubt our confidence in the future. Now, that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to bring down inflation. That's what we've just done. It's to balance the books. That's what we're doing. And to make sure that we put out a fully costed manifesto. And that's exactly what we've done. Get all those right. You bring the economy back into order. You see growth, and you start to help people to have that opportunity in life that this country can offer and that very few others can.
OK, Tom Tugendhat, Security Minister, still bravely fighting on. Thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your company.
Thanks,
now, coming up, we'll be talking about Britain's knife crime epidemic with an anti-knife crime campaigner. He's going to help you keep your children safe. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's not warm out there, but for most of us it's a fine day, and the winds are a bit lighter than yesterday, so it feels at least a little bit warmer. The weather's on the change, though. A couple of weather systems on their way in from the Atlantic. That's for tomorrow. But as I say, for the rest of today, most places set fair. There are a few showers still across northeast Scotland, one or two across eastern England as well, but they're tending to fade away. For many, it's a fine evening, and we'll see the cloud melting away. So for quite a few of us, it'll be a largely clear night, and that will allow it to turn quite chilly. Temperatures well down into single digits once more, down to 3 or 4 in many rural spots. Out west, though, temperatures will actually start to rise later in the night as the cloud arrives from those weather systems, bringing outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland. Eventually, that rain will spread into Scotland, but for much of tomorrow, northern Scotland will stay dry and fine. Still 1 or 2 showers close by to Shetland. Here is that rain, though, edging into Northern Ireland for the morning rush hour, so a soggy start here. Getting quite windy, too, especially on the east coast of Northern Ireland. The west coast of Wales and the southwest of England will see the winds steadily picking up as well. Many central and eastern parts having a dry, fine, if somewhat chilly start to the day. The cloud will increase over the Midlands and then into eastern England as the rain spreads into Wales, southwest England by lunchtime, southwest Scotland up towards the central belt by the end of the day, and also come the middle of the afternoon, some of that rain getting into the Midlands. Much of eastern England will stay dry until quite late on, and Same goes for northern Scotland. But in the west, getting very, very windy as well as wet. These western coasts particularly gusty for this time of year. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with the wind and the rain, which will continue to spread into eastern England and eventually into northern Scotland during the course of tomorrow evening. And the blustery and showery outlook will continue. Some sunny spells, but lots of heavy showers through the weekend. Temperatures a little higher, but feeling cooler with the gusty winds.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, the trial of former nurse Lucy Letby has started at Manchester Crown Court today. She's accused of attempting to murder a baby girl in February 2016 when working at the Countess of Chester Hospital. The 34-year-old from Hereford was previously convicted of a number of murders and attempted murders. Well, joining us now from Manchester Crown Court is our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, welcome to the show. Tell us more about this incredible case.
Well, this afternoon, Martin, the prosecution continued their opening statements here at Manchester Crown Court. Nick Johnson, KC, telling jurors that at one point the nurse responsible for Child K briefly left the unit to go and check on Child K's mother, and they say it was then that Lucy Letby struck. He told the jury it's their case that at this point Letby dislodged Child K's breathing tube, as well as disabling the alarms that should have notified those on the unit of K's declining health. He told the jury that at this point another doctor on the ward, Dr. Ravi Jairam, entered to find Letby ignoring Child K's declining health. They say in their words that Jairam caught her red-handed. Nick Johnson later told the jury that Child K then died 3 days later at Arrow Park Hospital in Liverpool. He said, "We're not suggesting what Lucy Letby did caused her death, but we are suggesting that Lucy Letby attempted to kill Child K." The defence also gave their opening statements here at Manchester Crown Court this afternoon. Benjamin Myers, KC, telling jurors, "You have each taken an oath to try Ms Letby and to give a true verdict according to the evidence, not a verdict based on sympathy or what you've read outside the courtroom." He set out their case, telling the jury that they believe that Letby did not dislodge Child K's breathing tube, that she has been wrongly accused of this, and that ultimately she is pleading not guilty. Court has now concluded for the day and is scheduled to resume once again tomorrow morning here at Manchester Crown Court.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sophie Reaper from Manchester Crown Court, on the latest case of Lucy Letby. Thank you very much. Now, more than 100 cadets, veterans and serving armed forces are marching in Nottingham, my home city, in honour of Britain's Second World War heroes. A traditional drumhead service was held at the city's Embankment War Memorial as part of events commemorating D-Day. Now, 80 years ago, the Battle of Normandy was raging with thousands of troops landing in France every day, as Will Hollis reports.
The men and women that served to protect Britain. In Nottingham, they remember those who came before. By the banks of the River Trent, a service at the city's War Memorial marking the anniversary of D-Day. Colonel James Gunn was training then. The 98-year-old remembers the perilous position Britain was in.
The country was absolutely right up against it. We were a single country.
We had no allies whatever except the Empire. Now, nowadays, I'm not allowed to talk nicely about the Empire, but without that, we would have been in real trouble.
James was lucky. He was commissioned with the British Indian Army as the war ended. But so many never came home. By now, 80 years ago, the Battle of Normandy was raging, with the number of Brits killed growing.
Frederick William Clark, Army, New Basefield.
A roll of honour, the men from Nottinghamshire who died on D-Day. The average age was 23. More than 20,000 allies under British command were killed in Normandy. Decades later, their sacrifice honoured not just by the armed forces, but the public too.
A lot of people, men laid down and women laid down their lives for how we can live today.
We lived in peace and we owe it to our armed forces.
I just get really upset, and my daughter's a Lord Lieutenant Cadet and I want my children to remember.
The Lord Lieutenant of Nottinghamshire, Veronica Pickering, says communities should connect with the armed forces.
This is a way of building bridges and building up family and community strength.
For 18-year-old cadet Daniel Hanlon, the parade is a privilege.
It's certainly an honour to have been selected for this position, and as such I get to come out here and do things like this, which are always fun and important for showing remembrance for the people who've come before us, the people we've lost.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. We will remember them. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
That's a beautiful package. It's hard not to be moved by that. Now, that's my home city, and everywhere you go, in every small village, you see the war memorials, you see the names of those who fell, and so often, so many brothers, so many villagers just lost all of their boys. It's so important that we remember them. It's difficult. You get choked up even now watching that. Excellent stuff. Now, don't go anywhere, because in the next hour we're discussing whether the Tories have accepted defeat already. Have they thrown in the towel? I'm Martin Daubney on Britain's news channel, GB News. But first, your weather, Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's not warm out there, but for most of us it's a fine day, and the winds are a bit lighter than yesterday, so it feels at least a little bit warmer. The weather's on the change, though. A couple of weather systems on their way in from the Atlantic. That's for tomorrow. But as I say, for the rest of today, most places set fair. There are a few showers still across northeast Scotland, one or two across eastern England as well, but they're tending to fade away. For many, it's a fine evening, and we'll see the cloud melting away. So for quite a few of us, it'll be a largely clear night, and that will allow it to turn quite chilly. Temperatures well down into single digits once more, down to 3 or 4 in many rural spots. Out west, though, temperatures will actually start to rise later in the night as the cloud arrives from those weather systems, bringing outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland. Eventually, that rain will spread into Scotland, but for much of tomorrow, northern Scotland will stay dry and fine. Still 1 or 2 showers close by to Shetland. Here is that rain, though, edging into Northern Ireland for the morning rush hour, so a soggy start here. Getting quite windy, too, especially on the east coast of Northern Ireland. The west coast of Wales and the southwest of England will see the winds steadily picking up as well. Many central and eastern parts having a dry, fine, if somewhat chilly start to the day. The cloud will increase over the Midlands and then into eastern England as the rain spreads into Wales, southwest England by lunchtime, southwest Scotland up towards the central belt by the end of the day, and also come the middle of the afternoon, some of that rain getting into the Midlands. Much of eastern England will stay dry until quite late on, and same goes for northern Scotland. But in the west, getting very, very windy as well as wet. These western coasts particularly gusty for this time of year. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with the wind and the rain, which will continue to spread into eastern England and eventually into northern Scotland during the course of tomorrow evening. And the blustery and showery outlook will continue. Some sunny spells, but lots of heavy showers through the weekend. Temperatures a little higher, but feeling cooler with the gusty winds.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Glasgow firstly, the southbound M73 around the Baillieston turn off junction 2. So heading towards the M8, 3 lanes through that stretch and just one of those lanes are open. A collision there is causing queues. Very slow, 45 minutes worth of delays on the southbound M6. 2 lanes are still coned off from Sandbach and Crewe at junction 17 down towards Stoke at junction 16 whilst the collision gets dealt with. Clockwise M25 just after the turn off of the M40 at junction 16, a 4-lane stretch. Lane 1, the inside lane, coned off. We're seeing delays. It's due to a collision. Also clockwise, just after Chertsey, junction 11. I can see on the cameras all the traffic at the moment being held, so it's queuing whilst the lorry fire is sorted out on that clockwise side of the M25. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're making this summer funner, with 3 incredible prizes to be won. First, a fantastic £15,000 in tax-free cash that you can spend on anything you like. Next, there's the latest iPhone 15 with a brand new set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. The summer fun could be on us. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said stunt.
you made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Today, the Tories appear to all but throw in the towel when Grant Shapps warned a Labour supermajority would put the UK in a dangerous place. Is this the most extraordinary act of political surrender in British history? I'll speak to a minister for their thoughts. 12-year-olds murdering with machetes. 46% of British teens terrified of knives, including 31% scared of blades in their own schools. Throughout today's show, I've been asking some of the UK's foremost experts, how do we stamp out the cancer of knife crime? And have you switched your heating back on like me? Slippers, onesies, fleecy undersheets, out of the wardrobe and back into commission? Well, later this hour, I'll be joined by the formidable weatherman, John Ketley, to ask him, it's June, why on earth is it so ruddy well cold? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, on the show, always a delight to have your company. Chris Hope has just hoved into view. He's been out on the Tory campaign trail today. I've been asking the question all day, have they simply given up? They're shutting up shop. They're raising the white flag. They're talking about supermajorities. They're more or less pleading with people not to vote for rival parties like Reform to try and keep their jobs. I find it astonishing. We're only halfway through the campaign, and yet it feels like we're approaching the end game. Let me know what you think about that. Are the Tories simply giving up. And do you blame them? A lot of you out there saying you want the Conservatives to feel some pain. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But before we get into the final hour, it's your news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, Rishi Sunak insists he hasn't given up hope of winning the general election, but he has warned voters not to give Labour a blank cheque. The Prime Minister was campaigning at a school in North East Lincolnshire this afternoon as new figures showed the economy recorded no growth in April. That's something of a setback for his recent claim that Britain had turned a corner in terms of its economy. The Tories pointed to figures that showed there was growth in the months before April, but the Lib Dems said Rishi Sunak has utterly failed to deliver on his promises. And Sir Keir Starmer says Labour's plan will renew the country.
The one thing that everybody expected and needed from Rishi Sunak was stability after the disaster of Liz Truss. What he's now done is become the latest version of Liz Truss with unfunded commitments. And I think the public know, voters know, that there's a cost to that and they want an alternative. And that's why I'm really pleased that tomorrow in our manifesto we will take a different approach. We will set out the case for growth, for rebuilding, for putting our nation first to go forward.
Well, a record number of people have lost faith in British politics. That's according to electoral expert Sir John Curtis. The analysis found trust and confidence in politics and the overall election system has never been lower. 45% of respondents almost never believe that governments of any party are fully focused on the challenges facing the country. A record 58% said they almost never trust politicians of any party to tell the truth. That's a 19-point increase on 2020. Scotland's First Minister says there should be another referendum on Scottish independence in the next 5 years. Joining SNP candidate Joanna Cherry on the campaign trail in Edinburgh, John Swinney denied suggestions he'd been downplaying the referendum in the election. He said the issue of independence relates to the principal concerns of the Scottish people, including the cost of living.
What's important is that when I look at the performance of other small European countries, independent countries, I see them delivering a stronger economic performance and stronger public finances than the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom model is broken. It is absolutely broken. And the false debate that we're having in this election campaign is demonstrating that. I'm trying to say in this election campaign that there's £18 billion worth of spending cuts that essentially are baked into the Conservatives' projections about the future of the economy. And the Labour Party accepts that. And we cannot bear any more austerity within Scotland.
John Swinney. Now, turning our attentions to France, where the president there is vowing to fight on, even if his party suffers losses in a snap election that he's called. Emmanuel Macron says dissolving parliament was the only possible response to the gains made by right-wing parties in last week's European elections. He says the vote will bring clarity for the French people, though polls put the right-wing leader Marine Le Pen in first place, with Macron trailing in third. He's urged political rivals to join him now by forging a democratic alliance against Le Pen's National Rally Party. The US Secretary of State says some of the latest changes put forward by the terror group Hamas for a ceasefire in Gaza are unworkable, meaning the war will go on. Antony Blinken's been studying the latest demands alongside mediators in Qatar. It's understood Hamas will only accept President Biden's deal if it gets written guarantees from the United States over a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's military says around 160 rockets have been fired into the north of the country from Lebanon. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for those attacks. Here in the UK, the Co-op Bank has apologised after customers complained of a glitch that saw payments taken twice from some small business account holders. People took to social media to vent their frustration, with one claiming they were £5,000 out of pocket with no resolution in sight. Another said their account had been in overdraft all day, but they hadn't had any notification from the bank. A spokesperson for Co-op apologised and said a correction is currently being processed. And just lastly, CCTV footage has been released of a man caught stealing a Victorian brass eagle lectern worth £6,000 from a church near Birmingham. The lectern is thought to date back to 1868, which is when the Edgbaston Church officially opened. If you're watching on TV, you can see the thief approaching the altar, then the lectern, removing it from the column, covering it with a blanket and then calmly walking out. West Midlands Police are investigating the theft, which happened in just 2 minutes in broad daylight. That's the latest news. Do sign up for GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now we're expecting another huge clash tonight between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer as they go head-to-head again in their second TV debate. Now, the leaders will face heavy questioning on key battlegrounds like the economy and immigration. Plus, they'll both have to defend themselves amid a range of accusations. Keir Starmer will be quizzed on Labour's plans for taxation and the Prime Minister on whether he's detached from voters after admitting the hardship that he went without Sky TV due to parental sacrifices. Well, let's cross live now to GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who is in Grimsby, the seat of tonight's debate. Welcome to the show, Catherine. So tell us, what can we expect tonight? Slightly different format. They're not going head-to-head. Tell us, what can we expect?
Yes, good afternoon, Martin, from Grimsby. Quite different from the last leaders' debate just a week ago in that they will have two one-to-one interviews. Keir Starmer first for 20 minutes, then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for 20 minutes, and then a 25-minute Q&A with the audience. So the last leaders' debate, it was quite staccato, wasn't it? They only had 45 seconds to answer questions. There was a lot of interrupting. Rishi Sunak just banged that message, Labour are going to put up your taxes, over and over again. So Keir Starmer tried to put across some sort of more nuanced arguments, but those got a little bit lost. So there's going to be more time in this debate tonight to drill down into the policies. Of course, the Conservative manifesto announced yesterday, lots and lots of policies announced. Sir Keir Starmer, Labour, their policy manifesto document not out until tomorrow, of course, but we're not expecting many surprises. I think it's worth saying why it's chosen Grimsby, why we're here in Grimsby, particularly for this debate, because this is one of those classic red wall seats where voters lent their votes to the Conservatives back in 2019. There's been some boundary changes here, but basically this seat prior to that had been Labour since 1935. The Conservatives got a 7,000 majority here. Labour would certainly expect to be taking that back, assuming there's no huge change in the polls. Of course, Rishi Sunak is desperate for something to change. He needs a moment for the polls to start to shift and shift dramatically. So Keir Starmer, very much a safety-first approach. They simply want to be careful, want to be cautious, want to do nothing wrong to jeopardise that poll lead. But it's going to be a fascinating couple of hours later this evening.
Thank you, Catherine Forster, live from Grimsby. Of course, totemic, once in Britain's fishing industry, now a part of forgotten coastal Britain. All eyes on Grimsby tonight. Catherine Forster, excellent update. Thank you very much. Now, let's zoom back to the studio. I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Hope. Chris, you've been out on the campaign trail today with the Conservatives. We started the day with the extraordinary message from Grant Shapps, talking about a Labour supermajority, leading many to conclude they've simply thrown in the towel.
They're warning against it, and I asked that very question, have you given up, Prime Minister, on his battle bus as it went towards Grimsby? He said, no, absolutely not, and he then talked about his manifesto. What you saw yesterday, he told me, is we have put the manifesto first, and it's got very clear set of tax cuts for country tax cut at every stage of life. And tonight he'll be emphasising those tax cuts for old people, for families, for those in work, for self-employed, and the rest. He's trying to show that we are the tax-cutting party, the Tory party, against the one that they would say, though, characterised Labour as spending heavily. Of course, all hinges on this costings document still being debated. 18 billion of savings from closing that tax gap, getting more of us to pay our taxes correctly, and also cutting back on welfare spending. That's 18 billion of savings by the end of the Parliament, and then that's mirrored off by 17.2 billion of tax cuts. So that's the sum that they want us to talk about in GB News and to voters to present themselves with. But no question, he's still miles behind. And that remark there from Grant Shapps, this warning of a supermajority, he didn't want to use that term. He called it a blank cheque for Labour, but the meaning is the same. Basically, the bigger the majority, over 100-seat majority in the House of Commons, Labour can do basically what they like and no opposition party can stop them.
And, Chris, an astonishing sea change, I believe, in the mindset of Conservative voters in 2019. It was ABC, anyone but Corbyn. Brexit Party, stand aside. We have to get a big Tory majority. Figures out today saying 25% of those same Conservative voters from 2019 now want the Conservatives to lose every single seat. This feels like end of days territory.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like the government. That is one poll, and it sounds quite extreme. I think what's interesting, there's a YouGov poll yesterday, I thought, for Sky News. They've got Labour on 38 points, and the Tories on 18 points. Reform UK on 17 points. Now, if they can just combine those two numbers, 17 and 18 points, you're in hung Parliament territory. That, to me, is a challenge for Sunak. How do you neutralise the threat of Nigel Farage and recognise and ensure that voters recognise that votes for the reform will mean a bigger majority for Keir Starmer? As for Rishi Sunak, who I was with earlier over lunchtime today in Grimsby, he is saying he's always pumped. He's saying he's genuinely energised. He sees yesterday as an inflection point in a campaign. We're 3 weeks in. 3 weeks ago, 22 days to go. We've now got the policy platform. It's about selling that document. No more speculation about this or that policy. We know what this party will offer this country for the next 5 years. Let's sell it to the country. That's where he comes from. Problem is, he's being asked, why are you so far behind? No one's listening.
The polls have been flat as a pancake since the election was announced in the drizzle. 23...
It wasn't drizzle, it was pouring with rain. I was in it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it still feels like a damp squib. Yesterday, Silverstone, any signs at all this has revved up the electorate?
No, not yet. And indeed, to me, it felt flat in the room. There wasn't a kind of cheering. He wasn't glimpsing the sunny uplands. He wasn't showing us the ambition of what 5 years of Sunak could give. It just felt a bit weary, frankly, and the offer was quite limited. What they'd done, as I said yesterday, is they've tried to get these different policies out in the first 3 weeks. Nothing has worked. So at the end of the day, when we saw the manifesto, the main thing in there was a cut for self-employed on fewer than £50,000 a year. Quite a limited cut, given the scale of the offer for the next 5 years.
As you always say, Rishi Sunak, as an individual, full of beans, full of vim, full of confidence.
Full of Haribos, by the way, and Twixes. That's what he lives on.
Not the best advert. Maybe the Labour Party might try to get his teeth inspected. On a serious point, behind the scenes, within the party, away from the cameras, does it feel more now like damage limitation?
I would say to viewers, look at where he's campaigning. He's mainly campaigning...
in safe seats.
In safe seats. He's campaigning in... I went to see him in Windsor. I mean, Windsor's not a seat which the Tory Prime Minister should be anywhere near. He should be out battling in the Red Wall, battling in the southwest where they were in 2015, and surprising us all with that surprise Tory majority by killing off the Liberal Democrats. He's not doing this. He is running a safe campaign. He's not out there taking the risks I think he needs to make, and he's not. Like, we saw Nigel Farage being pelted on a bus. We saw him get milkshaked last week. And, you know, he's saying he won't be silenced. He's using the opposition to him to fuel the voters to get out and back Nigel Farage and Reform UK. I don't see that passion out there in terms of what he's doing. Yes, he's passionate when you meet him, and you'll see it on TV tonight. And we'll have Catherine Forster in the spin room. Do come back to GB News if you're watching it, because she'll be out there getting all the best reaction for GB News viewers. But I don't see the passion and the need to get out there and take risks. The risk I would take, just finally, is when his battle bus pulls in, get on board, Rishi, and then jump off it and have a random half an hour with voters that no one's expecting. You can get away with it. The security won't be a problem because no one knows he's there, and it'll be great TV.
Well, midnight tonight is the exact halfway mark of this election campaign.
And nothing has happened in the polls.
No.
That's the problem.
That's the point. Does it feel like it's already approaching 5 minutes to midnight for the Conservatives?
It's past that, maybe. Do
you reckon?
Maybe 1 minute to midnight. I think it's looking very, very difficult to pull it back. If they do, it will be a lot of humble pie being eaten by pollsters.
Sobering stuff there, Chris Hope. Thank you very much for motoring back to join us in the studio for the 5 o'clock. Been out and about with the Prime Minister all day. Chris Hope, thank you very much. Always a delight. Now, moving on, we desperately need to talk about spiralling knife crime. On Monday, 2 12-year-old boys were jailed for murdering Sean Sisahai with a 16-inch machete, making them Britain's youngest killers since the case of James Bulger. And today, 2 grim reports cast a further dark shadow across Britain. First, the West Midlands has now become the knife crime capital of the UK. Astonishingly, knife crime there is 8.3% higher even than in London. Next, a shocking BBC survey claimed that 46% of British teenagers are now scared of knife crime, including a staggering 31% who are scared of knives within their own schools. Now, many things have been blamed for this: gang culture, austerity, even grime music. But today I want to ask the question, where are the parents? And is it time to punish them? Well, joining me now is Ken Hines. He's the former chair of the Haringey Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. Ken, welcome to the show. It's always a delight to talk to you. It's a shame it's under such sad circumstances. Ken, you and I have had this debate now endlessly. You've made this your life's work to campaign on this. And I know that you've spoken to me before, common sense about this issue, beginning with parental control. In the case we've seen of these 2 12-year-olds, Ken, we saw, I think we get a picture on screen now, a 12-year-old lad with a 16-inch machete down his trousers, strapped to his chest. That's the boy there, a 12-year-old kid who was one of the 2 boys who murdered Sean. His neighbours reporting today this child was out of control. They put barbed wire on their own perimeter to keep this child away. Ken, I'm saying to you now, where on earth are the parents?
Look, Martin, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me onto this platform. But my deepest condolence and my heartfelt sadness goes out to the parent whose son was murdered in this situation. But when we go back and look and see this situation, sadly, it is nothing new. And unless we do something drastically, we're going to have more of the same happening down the line. Now, we've got to look and see what's going on. You mentioned about the parent. Now, I don't know much about the parent's background in this situation, but what I can say from dealing with other parents that gets me involved when they're reach their wits' end, I'm talking about both parents, both fathers and mothers, calling me in to help with their children. Simply, what I'm seeing is that they're asking for help. Sometimes they even reach out to the statutory agency, and the statutory agency in some cases, doesn't seem to be able to do much about what's going on. The police, again, they reach out, don't seem to be able to do much unless a crime has been committed. So what happens is something has to happen drastically before the police step in or the social service step in. We also got to look about the schools, because this child here would have exhibiting that kind of behaviour, not just overnight, but over some substantial time. What about the school involvement? Have they seen something? Have the parents gone to the GP and maybe reported that they're having a challenging time with their son and asking for support? And the other thing, the social media influence. Look what he's posted out there, how he's there with the knives and stuff. And my thing is simply, there's a lot of things we're unpacking here, but the other thing, this will be a warning to other parents, not just to take the word of your child, because your child has a home face and he has a street face. The home face will disarm you. The street face could get him into serious problem, and that could be brought back into the home. My thing is simply this. You need to go into their bedroom and satisfy yourself that there's nothing there that they should not have. And some parents, don't get me wrong, some parents are complicit because they accept whatever the child brings in. If it's helping pay the electric or gas or putting some food on the table, some parent will just accept it and don't ask questions, but they need to because it escalates from there. And my thing is that what kind of society are we that give children so much rights, their rights, but don't give them or teach them responsibility or hold them to account when they don't do things right. Another thing that
Ken, what do we do? I mean, loads of great ideas there. What do we do? I mean, a 16-inch machete on a 12-year-old boy, that is extraordinary. What do we do? Just straight to jail?
Jail may not work in many cases, but what I sometimes believe that needs to be done with a lot of these first-time offenders, no matter how young they are, a boot camp style incarceration where for 6-8 weeks where they're brought in, they're drilled, they're given discipline, and most importantly, you also have to work on growing their emotional intelligence, because a lot of these youngsters says, "I'm afraid," you know, and when they see pictures of the sort of knives and machetes and things that the police take that takes off of people, they're thinking, well, look, I've got to step my game up because look what's out there. And so, and what, like what you're showing here, really, these sort of thing emboldens these young people to really step their game up. Back in my days, we'd be walking with a lock knife or a flick knife, right? That's going back some 30 years ago. Now, something's gone very wrong if young people think that they can walk with these implements without disregard to anybody. They're not, and we say to them, well, what about stop and search? My thing is, unless you've got the intelligence that target these people, because it doesn't back it up in the stop and search figures, we are going, it's a fishing expedition that the police are not very good at getting these knives off the street. People like ourselves, street barbers, we get called in by the parents and we take knives and we take other weapons from their home. Ken,
I'm afraid we have to leave it there. You're a font of knowledge. It's always a delight to talk to you, and I hope next time when we talk there hasn't been another tragic murder. Thank you very much for joining us, Ken Hines. Now, coming up, we'll be discussing how city law firms have been urged to stop hosting work social events at the pub over fears they may exclude Muslim members of staff. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
How can we have Britain's Got Talent? A British girl did win. Yes. This weekend.
Christmas, her name is.
Yes, Sydney Christmas.
Sydney Christmas.
She's a singer. I'm guessing she's going to have a Christmas single out.
She's a cruise ship singer and she works in a gym.
First woman to win in 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, I don't watch it anymore.
But some people clearly do. But apparently 5 of the last in the final were not British born or even live here.
Outrageous.
I know. So why call it Britain's Got Talent?
I know.
It's bizarre, isn't it? It sums up as well this difference between the British public and most people on the telly.
Yeah.
Because the judges do not notice this lack of British involvement in it, or at least if they do notice it, they're not saying anything about it. But the viewers notice the imbalance, and just 4 of the foreign acts made it through to the final in the end. There was one, a patriotic protest protest in London on Saturday, as it was described. There was hundreds of thousands of people there. There were students against tyranny were there. There was Tommy Robinson was there, much maligned, divisive figure. But these people would say, we are feeling the need to walk on the streets of this country because we no longer feel we can assert our British identity.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between patriotism and xenophobia. And I think patriotism is great, and people like to feel a sense of identity, they feel a sense of belonging, you know, they understand what their flag is for, and they kind of, British values, which we all adhere to. And then there's xenophobia, which is sort of, we hate anyone who's not British. So I think I think that march that we saw at the weekend was actually quite patriotic. I don't think it was xenophobic at all. I think it was a nice sort of... They all seemed very kind of peaceful. And there wasn't any horrible rhetoric or anything like that. Certainly much less horrible rhetoric than we're used to seeing from the pro-Palestinian marches.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GBNews, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:27 now. City law firms have been urged to stop hosting work social events at the pub over fears that they exclude Muslim staff. A report suggests that the legal profession's big drinking culture is unfair to those who abstain from alcohol. Instead, they've suggested that law firms introduce more cooking, painting or pottery classes to boost team bonding. Well, joining me now to discuss this is social policy analyst Rakib Hassan. Rakib, 5 o'clock on a Friday, let's go and have a pottery lesson, said no Brit ever.
Well, I think that looking at this particular report, which was published by a UK graduate recruitment company called Rare, which specialises in diversity, I think one thing that we have to realise is that if the Telegraph's coverage of this report is correct, it's based on 10 Muslim interviewees, just 10. So it's not the most comprehensive sample. And I'd make this point that I've done plenty of research, Martin, as you know, on British Muslim attitudes. And the vast majority of British Muslims think that Britain is a very good place to live, actually, when it comes to making headway and excelling in life. And if you compare to other European countries such as France, Germany, and the Netherlands, the UK fares very well when it comes to religious accommodation. So I think it's all about give and take here. And the reality is, in certain sectors, there is an established drinking culture. I don't see the problem with really going to a pub and a bar. There's plenty of non-alcoholic beverages available. I know that better than most because I don't drink. I'm a practicing Muslim, but I've plenty of very good client meetings in such establishments.
And there's a lot of people responding to this survey, Rakib, by saying this is another example of the tail wagging the dog. You know, we are Britain. This is our culture. One of the respondents here, Hamza, said it feels dishonourable in terms of religious beliefs going into a pub because that's a place we don't really like to associate ourselves with. Well, simple answer then is don't go.
Well, no, absolutely. And I'd make the point that if it leads to family-related or community-related disapproval, if you go to a pub or a bar, but you don't drink there, then I think, to be honest, I think there needs to be discussions to be had within that particular family and indeed within that particular local community, because I don't really see the issue going to a pub or a bar for a work-related event. But if you don't drink there, then I'm struggling to see what the issue is.
But it is important to highlight these things and to push back, because we all know, Rakib, one complaint, one wrong foot, people run scared and entire cultures are changed. We don't highlight this. How long before it is mandated no drinking after work in case it offends people of a particular religious belief? Well, integrate. This is British culture. This is the way we do things. Like it or lump it.
Well, I think that, as I said previously, it's all about give and take, and it's all about mutual compromise as well. But I think to the point where you completely shun alcohol-related events, the idea that you could introduce alcohol-free events in a wholesale manner, especially in the legal sector, the idea is for the birds. To be absolutely honest, I always think there's opportunities to integrate diverse workplaces, but that can't be at the expense of doing away with established workplace cultures which have been here for decades, if not centuries.
Yeah, I know a few lawyers, and the concept that at 5 o'clock on a Friday they'll all get onto a pottery wheel. Rakib-Hassan is utter fantasy. But look, thanks for joining us on the show. Always a delight to have your company. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. I'll be speaking with a shadow minister shortly about whether her party is getting complacent after Grant Shapps' supermajority comment earlier today, and also what we can expect in the Labour manifesto. Looking ahead to that, and of course it is released tomorrow. But first, it's your news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak insists he hasn't given up hope of winning the general election, but he has warned voters not to give Labour a blank cheque. The Prime Minister was campaigning at a school in North East Lincolnshire this afternoon, as new figures showed the economy recorded no growth in April. It's something of a setback after his recent claim that Britain's economy had turned a corner. The Tories, though, point to figures that show there was growth in the months before April. The Lib Dems say Rishi Sunak has utterly failed to deliver on his promises, while Sir Keir Starmer says Labour's plan will renew the country. Meanwhile, chronic numbers of potholes in roads would be fixed under a new plan by the Labour Party. They say Tory cuts have led to poorly maintained roads, causing damage to cars and contributing to higher insurance premiums. The party's promising to direct special funding to councils to fix 1 million potholes every year, and says Labour will turn the tide of neglect. Scotland's First Minister says there should be another referendum on Scottish independence within the next 5 years. Joining SNP candidate Joanna Cherry on the election trail today in Edinburgh, John Swinney denied suggestions he'd been downplaying the referendum question in the election. He said the issue of independence relates to the principal concerns of the Scottish people. And the French president is vowing to fight on, even if his party suffers losses in a snap election. Emmanuel Macron says dissolving parliament was the only response possible to the gain made by right-wing parties in last weekend's European elections. He insists the vote will bring clarity, though polls put the right-wing leader Marine Le Pen in first place, with centre-left Macron trailing third. He's urging political rivals to join him, forging a democratic alliance against Le Pen's National Rally Party. Those are the headlines. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Now here's a quick snapshot of today's markets, and the pound buying you $1.2846 and €1.1845. The price of gold is £1,818.63 an ounce, and the FTSE 100 has closed for the day today at 8,215 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, I've had hundreds of comments on your say today. We spoke with Sir John Curtis earlier on today about shattered trust in British politics. You really have pulled your heart out about that. Here's what Richard had to say. I'm afraid I don't believe any politicians anymore, especially when it's election time. They tell things we want to hear, but when elected, nothing ever happens. I'm afraid they all live in la-la land. Well, Richard, straight to the point there. Somebody else who's straight to the point is Michelle Dewberry. Up next, Jubes & Co, 6 till 7. Michelle, my favourite part of the show, what's on your menu?
Well, I wondered how he's going to end your sentence there, because you said that Richard's saying people lives in la-la land, and then you said, and someone else. I thought you was going to say someone else that lives in la-la land. Anyway, look, that's an interesting topic there about that whole lack of trust in politicians. And tonight I've got not one, but two Lords alongside me. I've got Danny Finkelstein and Maurice Glassman. So I want to put to them this whole notion then about reform. Is this one of the ways that we engage people and get more trust into politics? Do we need to reform the House of Lords? Do we need to reform the political system, move to PR, for example? So I want to explore that. I also want to ask as well, why do we keep trying to shame people for being successful, for having wealth in this country? This whole notion of Rishi Sunak being pushed and pushed and pushed to say that he didn't have Sky when he was a kid. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? And I think it's going to actually put off successful people from even wanting to get involved in politics in the first place. There'll be mixed opinions on that one, I can tell you. And I also want to ask, do you think that we need to bring back UK industry to this country? And if so, what would that look like?
Superb stuff. Well, Michelle Jury, I didn't have Sky News when I was a kid. It hadn't even been invented. Michelle Jury, 6 till 7, Jubes & Co. looks superb. Thank you very much. Now, thanks to everyone who's got in touch with gbnews.com/your say. I'll be getting to more of those very shortly. Don't go anywhere.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long residual delays remain. Just watching the cameras heading south down the M6 through Cheshire from junction 17 to 16 heading away from Crewe towards Stoke-on-Trent. After the 2 left lanes were closed earlier on following an accident, all restrictions have now been lifted. In Bedfordshire, the A1 remains closed northeast of Bedford near to Chawston. A lorry's overturned just north of the Black Cat roundabout. Several problems on the M25. Firstly, the Surrey stretch is blocked clockwise 11 to 12 towards the M3 where a lorry's caught fire causing long queues back into the roadworks of the A3. Clockwise, the inside lanes shut just after the M40 following an accident, and also clockwise on the Hertfordshire stretch from 25 to 26 heading away from the A10. A breakdown is blocking off the left lane. And finally in Kent, the A20 at Aylesford is blocked by a collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Taylor Swift is in town. Her billion-dollar blockbuster Eras tour will arrive in this country today. What can we expect?
Yes, that's right. This tour has been a long time in the making. It kicked off last March in America, in Arizona. So it's eventually now made its way to the UK, and tonight it will be kick-starting in Edinburgh. It will also have dates in Liverpool, Cardiff, Dublin and London. So needless to say, there is a lot of Swiftie fans on the loose right now. It's like Beatlemania all over again. But what I love about Taylor, though, is the fact that she exudes empowerment, confidence, and she also is such a good role model as well, I think, for the younger generation. She's always had this wholesome image as well. She writes all her own music, she plays lots of different instruments, and she's just an all-round great performer, isn't she?
But she's actually done a whole load of different types of music, hasn't she?
She has, that's right. She started off as a country pop singer and she's now transcended into this mainstream music artist, and she's such a massive reach. Like I say, she's toured around America, South America, Europe and now the UK. She's very much a household name, and I mean, I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't know who Taylor Swift is right now, like her or not.
She brings in the money. I mean, think about it, not just the ticket sales, but also all of the hotel accommodation people are booking, or the transport, or the extras, the food, the drink, the what do you call it? All the stuff that you buy that goes merch, all of that, the Swiftie merch. Yeah. She's a boom to the economy.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. I'm Martin Dorby. This is GB News. Now, let's get back now to the general election campaign. And Labour has been accused of not being transparent over its taxation plans. Well, I can now speak to Labour's Shadow Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh. Louise, welcome to the show. I see you're up there at Grimsby waiting for the big event tonight. Let's talk about tax. The rumours have been flying around. First of all, it's going to cost £2,000 more under the Labour Party. Rachel Reeves saying it's going to cost almost £5,000 more under the Conservatives. We're all getting a bit bludgeoned to death by statistics. Looking ahead to tomorrow, can we expect any nasty tax rises in the Labour manifesto? Because people are saying we're out of money. There's only one way to get it, either to print it or to put up taxes. Are you going to become a socialist party of high tax, as the Tories have been saying today?
Well, look, Labour have been very clear where we're going to set out our tax rises. We have been for several months ahead of the manifesto, and yes, the manifesto is going to be published tomorrow, but you will not see any other tax rises than those we've already set out. And those include abolishing the non-dom tax rate. They include abolishing the relief on VAT on private school fees. They include expanding the windfall tax on the obscene profits of oil and gas giants because of the war in Ukraine, and they involve taxing private equity interest carryover. So we have set out limited tax rises on the broader shoulders in order to inject much needed funds in public services. The Conservatives, by contrast, in their manifesto yesterday, promised billions and billions of pounds in unfunded spending commitments, clearly not learning any lessons from their disastrous mini-budget under Liz Truss less than 2 years ago, which working people are still paying the price for with higher mortgages.
Louise, a lot of people were astonished yesterday when Sir Keir Starmer said that the Tory manifesto giveaway felt like a Jeremy Corbyn-style giveaway, which is a bit ironic because Sir Keir Starmer backed 2 of those manifestos in 2017 and 2019. Is it really the best idea to bring up the spectre of Jeremy Corbyn?
Sorry, there was just a dog running by my foot. It gave me a shock. What Keir was saying yesterday was that the Tories, as I say, have clearly not learned any lessons from the Liz Truss mini-budget in 2019. The electorate roundly rejected our manifesto in the 2019 general election, and we have learned lessons from then. We have learned lessons, we've listened to the public, and we've responded, and that's why tomorrow you'll see us publish a manifesto that is completely funded, completely costed, in stark contrast to what the Tories published yesterday, which, as we have set out, would increase interest rates, just as the Liz Truss mini-budget did when she attempted unfunded tax cuts for the very richest, and that will have a knock-on impact on people's mortgages, as we're already experiencing after the consequences of Liz Truss. The manifesto yesterday was Liz Truss on steroids. It will have profound consequences for people through their mortgage payments and through prices in the shops.
A lot of people are getting confused. Was it Liz Truss? Was it Jeremy Corbyn? I mean, you know, these metaphors are thrown around. Let's get back to one of your taxation policies, which caused a lot of chagrin amongst hard-working, working-class and middle-class people who want to get the kids into private school. Emily Thornberry admitted that it's guaranteed to increase the size of classrooms in the state sector. That will force hard-working people out of state school areas with the best schools. It will push the poorest into the sinker states, into the worst schools. Is this really a party that backs working-class aspiration?
Well, look, we don't accept any kind of figures about pupils moving from private into state schools, and Emily Thornberry misspoke when she acknowledged that the other day. Bridget Phillipson, our Shadow Education Secretary, has since corrected it. Private school fees have risen far faster than inflation over the last few years, and that has not had a downward pressure on the number of children attending private schools. And I think what's important to recognise is that this is a tax on the schools themselves, not on parents, and they will be able to claim VAT back on their own spending. So it's up to them how they want to pass the VAT on. And we don't anticipate that there will be a significant number of children, or really any significant number of children moving into state school. What that money will go on is investing in breakfast clubs for every primary school in maintained schools across Britain and in academies, and driving up standards in maintained schools and academies right across the country, so that every child can get the best quality access to education. And that's the kind of ambition and aspiration that we want for every child, no matter where they grow up in this country.
And Louise, finally, Grant Shapps today, an extraordinary comment. He said that we're heading for a Labour supermajority. Do you feel like the Conservatives have almost given up on this general election campaign?
Well, not a single vote has been cast yet, and it would be an extraordinary outcome if Labour achieved a majority really of any kind. The challenge that we have to achieve a majority of even one would be akin to the election win that Tony Blair managed in 1997. So we know every vote is still to play for, and I think what Grant Shapps was attempting to do this morning was distract from their disastrous performance after disastrous performance in this election campaign, whether it be returning from D-Day far too early for the Prime Minister, or acknowledging that he wasn't as rich as he might be because he didn't have Sky when he was a child. I think he is proving time and time again how out of touch he is with ordinary people in Britain, and this was Grant Shapps' last-ditch attempt to distract people from that.
OK, Labour's Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Haigh, thank you very much, and well done for putting up there with a mid-interview pitch invasion from a dog. Thank you very much for joining us live from Wigan.
Thank you.
Now, have you switched your heating back on like me? Slippers, onesies, fleecy undersheets, are they out of the wardrobe and back into commission? Well, in just a moment, I'll be joined by the formidable weatherman John Ketley himself, a comfort blanket from the past, and ask him, it's June, why is it so really well cold? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's not warm out there, but for most of us it's a fine day, and the winds are a bit lighter than yesterday, so it feels at least a little bit warmer. The weather's on the change, though. A couple of weather systems on their way in from the Atlantic. That's for tomorrow. But as I say, for the rest of today, most places set fair. There are a few showers still across northeast Scotland, one or two across eastern England as well, but they're tending to fade away. For many, it's a fine evening, and we'll see the cloud melting away. So for quite a few of us, it'll be a largely clear night, and that will allow it to turn quite chilly. Temperatures well down into single digits once more, down to 3 or 4 in many rural spots. Out west, though, temperatures will actually start to rise later in the night as the cloud arrives from those weather systems, bringing outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland. Eventually, that rain will spread into Scotland, but for much of tomorrow, northern Scotland will stay dry and fine. Still 1 or 2 showers close by to Shetland. Here is that rain, though, edging into Northern Ireland for the morning rush hour, so a soggy start here, getting quite windy too, especially on the east coast of Northern Ireland. The west coast of Wales and the southwest of England will see the winds steadily picking up as well. Many central and eastern parts having a dry, fine, if somewhat chilly start to the day. The cloud will increase over the Midlands and then into eastern England as the rain spreads into Wales, southwest England by lunchtime, southwest Scotland up towards the central belt by the end of the day, and also come the middle of the afternoon, some of that rain getting into the Midlands. Much of eastern England will stay dry until quite late on, and same goes for northern Scotland. But in the west, getting very, very windy as well as wet. These western coasts particularly gusty for this time of year. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with the wind and the rain, which will continue to spread into eastern England and eventually into northern Scotland during the course of tomorrow evening. And the blustery and showery outlook will continue. Some sunny spells, but lots of heavy showers through the weekend. Temperatures a little higher, but feeling cooler with the gusty winds.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:49. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, last year marked the UK's hottest June on record. But unfortunately, the same cannot be said for this month, can it? With Brits fighting cold winds and frequent rain. Temperatures have averaged 3 to 5 degrees below normal this time of year. But is this simply a typical British summer? And can we expect any sunshine at all in the coming months? Well, let's now find out by speaking to an expert. And of course, it's the meteorologist John Ketley, the legend, the mustachio Goliath, the weatherman I grew up with. John, you're like a comfort blanket from the past. Isn't that ironic? So I've got my blankets back out the flaming wardrobe. John, what's going on?
Yes, good afternoon to you, I should say, Martin. Well, even at the time I was doing television on a regular basis, we were getting rubbish tunes just like this one, you know. And I'm still broadcasting on a daily basis, I have to say, to this day. So I'm keeping going. I'm still trying to get it right, basically. We've had some terrible tunes in the past, you know. I've been looking through the records since I knew that we were going to be speaking this afternoon. And 1991 was an awful June. That was the year that Mount Pinatubo went up over in the Philippines, and a lot of people said it was because of that, all that rubbish and sulfates and aerosols that were up in the atmosphere were causing it to cool. It did cool the world, and we certainly had a very, very bad June in 1991. But more recently as well, 2011, 12, 13, all very poor Junes indeed. 2012, if you remember, was when we had the Olympics, the London Olympics in 2012, slightly later. I think it's more for July. But that month was absolutely awful, June, really, really wet. And something like the wettest since the coolest since 1991, the dullest since 1987. And some places had 4 times their normal rainfall. And apparently there were hailstones falling in Leicestershire and Lincolnshire the size of cricket balls. Well, I've enjoyed my cricket over the years, but I wouldn't have fancied that, I can tell you.
So what's going on this year, John? I mean, is it climate change? We're going to guarantee to hear that that's the excuse.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. I can hear it now, Martin. I'm not going along that line at all. It is our British weather. You've mentioned already, of course, that last year was an exceptional June. Really unusual to get a good June. Our best summer months are nearly always July or August. And last June was exceptional. You know, there's been a long-standing fact that ever since 1860, when long-standing records go back temperature-wise day by day, the 13th of June, which is tomorrow, of course, we'd never seen a temperature of 30 degrees reached until last year. That was the only day of the 3 months of summer that we'd never seen 30 degrees. And last year, we broke that record at long last. Well, this year we won't. Definitely won't tomorrow. 18 perhaps we're going to get. And at the moment, there's no sign of a big change. Of course, we've got Royal Ascot coming up next week. It would be nice to have some warmer weather for that. I think that's on the cusp at the moment. But I will put my money down. I will say that at some point this month, we are going to get temperatures up around 27. It may be the last 4 days, but not in the next 4 days.
Well, thank you for giving us some crumbs of comfort there. John Ketley is a weatherman. Legend, thanks for being on the show. It's always a delight to have your company. Now, I've got a quick couple of emails, your says, before we finish the show. On trust in politics, Leslie says this: I don't believe one word that Starmer or Sunak say. Fitz adds this: I can't watch this general election at all anymore. It's making me so angry and bad-tempered. John adds this: is there any point in the leaders' debate tonight as Starmer would just answer every question by saying that the answer is in the manifesto, which is launched tomorrow, and he doesn't want to preempt any of that? Lynn says this: Rishi Sunak should not throw the towel in. He called the general election, so he should fight tooth and nail to turn things around. And finally, on the Green Party, Michael says this: their party's pledge to ban all diesel and petrol cars from the UK roads in 2035 shows they might eat muesli, but actually they're all fruitcakes. Michael, I like what you did there. Superb stuff. Now, keep those comments coming in. That's it from me now for today. Jubes & Co, of course, is up next, 6 till 7. Don't forget to join from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's breakfast with Stephen and Ellie, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 a.m. with Andrew and Bev. And then, of course, it's Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. Then it's My Ugly Mush back at 3 till 6. I'm Martin Daubney. This has been GB News. Stay tuned for Jubes & Co. But before all of that, it's your weather with Alex Deacon. Have a fantastic evening.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's not warm out there, but for most of us it's a fine day, and the winds are a bit lighter than yesterday, so it feels at least a little bit warmer. The weather's on the change though. A couple of weather systems